primary steel would not be a misfortune, it would be negligence.
Thank you. I thank the honourable member for giving way, and he will know on the committee we've spoken to defence companies about how necessary it is to not rely on imports at a time like this. So does he agree with me that national resilience and defence rely on an industrial security?
Honourable friend is absolutely right. And what we need to remember in this debate today is that 95% of our rail infrastructure is made by British Steel. British Steel supplies 3/4 of every major construction project in this country. We're about to invest, thanks to the Chancellor, £10 billion in the rearmament of this country. Much of what we need to put in place in the future will be made by British Steel. How can we afford to let British Steel go out of business today? How can we vote against the bill which is on the table in front of us today? British Steel is not simply a pillar of British industry, it is a cornerstone of our economic security. I give way to the honourable member.
To the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Would he agree with me that this argument, as a card-carrying advocate of industrial strategy, applies also to some of our key other high-growth sectors, in fusion, in quantum, in space? We have got to accept that the days of easy globalisation are over and be a bit more strategic about how we support our emerging industries.
Mr. Speaker, you know that I could answer that question all day, and you will rule me out of order, and I'm going to confine my remarks to the bill that is on the table in front of us. But I agree with the honourable gentleman. He is absolutely right, and that is why we have got to work harder across this House to build a consensus about the big calls that we need to get right for our future. Right now, British Steel, I will in a moment, British Steel faces significant headwinds. Not just Chinese steelmakers flooding the market, but the new 25% tariff that we have from the United States. And we've got to now rise to the challenge of decarbonisation. And yet, in this House, we have got to keep our eyes on the prize ahead of us. The Chancellor has just committed £100 billion worth of capital investment. We are building affordable homes at a pace not seen in decades. We are investing £10 billion in defence. There is a market to seize, but only if we have the means to supply it. British Steel cannot profit from Britain's future if Chinese firms are allowed to kill it today. Give way to the honourable member.
I thank the member for giving way, and I agree with him that we need a steel industry in Britain, and I agree with him that we need to invest in it. Does he not think that today we could be going a bit further, and instead of this temporary measure, actually taking the whole steel industry into public ownership, so it can be what it has always been, the bedrock of manufacturing industry in Britain, and give us security for the future, free from market forces?
Well, the right honourable gentleman may well be right, but this is the second key point that I wanted to just land, Mr. Speaker, because the truth is, Jingyi is a mess. The reality is this company has failed to publish accounts since 2021. 2 auditors have resigned. One cited material concerns about its ability to remain a going concern. Inventories can't be verified. Cash flow statements are missing. The company is not acting in good faith, and that is why the Secretary of State is right to take the powers that he's asking for today. I will in a moment. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is clear that the escalating trade war between China and the United States now created the imperative to act today. It is clear that Zhengyi was about to move primary steelmaking capability from Scunthorpe back to China and merely use the downstream mills in Scunthorpe. That may have been good for China's economic security, but it is not good for Britain's national security, and that is why we need to give the Secretary of State the powers that he is asking for today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in conclusion, the options on the table are very simple. The Secretary of State could do nothing, and they would watch the furnaces close. They could hope, but hope is not a strategy. Or they could act, as they have done today. They have acted with strength, decision, for the long-term interest in our country, and this House should give the Secretary of State its full and unabated support.
A very good afternoon to you. You are watching and listening to GB News. This is, of course, an historic emergency recall of Parliament. The MPs are there debating the Steel Industry Special Measures Bill. When this is finished, we will have immediate reaction here in the studio with a panel of experts. Don't go anywhere.
as a result of the Conservatives' failings, and where the Labour government is now trying to give itself unprecedented powers. Thinking back, it is quite astounding that even after British Steel was sold for £1, even after British Steel entered insolvency, even after the government's insolvency service temporarily ran the firm, the Conservatives pressed ahead to erect more trade barriers through their botched Brexit deal. They scrapped the Industrial Strategy Council and allowed the sale of the steel plant to a Chinese firm, which now, according to ministers, is refusing to negotiate in good faith to at least keep the plant going. The Conservatives were asleep at the wheel. They failed to tackle energy costs, they failed to tackle business rates, and now Trump's tariffs and his contagious protectionism is now the straw that has broken the camel's back. I will.
Good on James, thank you. Would the Honourable Lady also agree with me? In 2015, they were in government when the steelworks in Redcar closed and thousands of people lost jobs.
As he will know, the three things that I just outlined, British Steel being sold for £1, entering insolvency, and the government's insolvency service being temporarily running the firm, all happened in 2019. Mr. Speaker, with Putin's barbaric war in Europe and Donald Trump's disastrous tariffs causing economic turmoil around the world, we must secure the future of steel production here at home. We Liberal Democrats welcome the sense of seriousness and urgency shown by the government in recalling Parliament. We must work together to rescue our steel sector and the tens of thousands of jobs that rely on it, directly and indirectly. But under the terms of this bill, the Secretary of State is giving himself huge and unconstrained powers which could set a very dangerous precedent. I urge the Secretary of State, in the strongest possible terms, to make a simple commitment today that the powers that he is giving himself will be repealed as soon as possible, within 6 months at the latest, and if they are still required after that, whether he will come back to this House to ask for another vote if he wants to extend them.
Well, the Honourable Member for giving way, and as I've tried to articulate in my opening speech and second reading, I understand the gravity of it. I think also that puts some context to the demands for further powers to be included in this bill. I think the limitation, wide as they are, is the right measure, but I'll give her that absolute assurance and I'll seek to do exactly that.
I'm incredibly grateful to the Minister, for Secretary of State, for giving that assurance. And it is important for the very reasons that I will outline in terms of what the powers actually do. Clause 3(4)(a) gives the Secretary of State the power to break into anywhere to seize assets. Clause 3(4)(c) gives the Secretary of State the power to take whatever steps that he considers appropriate, not what a court or a reasonable person might consider to be appropriate, but what the Secretary of State considers to be appropriate to seize or secure the assets. Under the section on offences, Clause 4(3) makes it a crime for anyone not to follow the instructions of the Secretary of State or to refuse to assist the Secretary of State in taking those steps without a reasonable excuse. But a reasonable excuse is not defined in this bill, no examples are given, and quite frankly, it is very hard to work out what defence of a reasonable excuse might be accepted, given that under 3(4)(c), it is whatever the Secretary of State himself considers to be okay. In the section on indemnities, Mr. Speaker, Clause 6(1) appears to give the Secretary of State and potentially any other person who is with him, a police officer, a civil servant, border force, immunity from prosecution for using any of these wide-ranging powers. These powers are unprecedented and they are unconstrained, and I am grateful to the Secretary of State for saying that is precisely why he will intend to repeal these powers as soon as possible. Mr. Speaker, more broadly, the government must now also bring forward plans to guarantee the future of this vital sector. We know the steel industry is surrounded by crippling uncertainty, and after decades of underinvestment and a shocking indifference to our sovereign economic security, the previous Conservative government has left our sovereign national capacity on steel diminished and endangered. Yet there is no chance that the UK demand for steel will disappear. How absurd, how irresponsible is this, that we have a sustainable and enduring long-term market for British steel, but that our supply could keel over in a matter of days. because of the failures of that failed party. So looking ahead, Mr. Speaker, let us remember that saving Scunthorpe is necessary but not sufficient. There have been very significant discussions about the future ownership structure of this company. And given the very precarious fiscal position that the government finds itself in, it is important that all options on ownership are put on the table so that this House can take an informed decision about what it means for the public finances. So I hope that the government will make a commitment that in the coming weeks they will bring forward a report which will set out options for future ownership of the plant. Looking ahead, Mr. Speaker, there are many big questions that remain unanswered. Will the government immediately designate UK-made steel a nationally strategic asset? Will the government be using direct reduced iron? Will that form part of the UK's plans alongside protecting the production of virgin steel at Scunthorpe? When will the government bring forward a comprehensive plan to ensure that more British steel is used in vital infrastructure projects from defence to renewable energy? Will ministers work shoulder to shoulder with our European and Commonwealth partners to tear down trade barriers, including negotiating a customs union by 2030? Will the government develop initiatives to retrain and upskill workers across the country as we transition to greener methods of steel production? How does the government intend to respond to calls from UK Steel, which is calling for the government to achieve the lowest electricity prices in Europe, to achieve parity with competitors on network charges, and for wholesale electricity market reform? This case should also raise concerns, Mr. Speaker, about the role of Chinese corporate interests in the UK's national critical infrastructure. The decision by British Steel's Chinese owners to turn down the government's offer of £500 million of support to support the future of the Scunthorpe plant has directly precipitated the current crisis. We must now be clear-eyed about the potential risks posed by Chinese involvement in our country's vital infrastructure. To that end, can the Minister tell the House when the government's promised UK-China audit will be released, and as part of that, articulate how the government plans to strengthen protections for critical infrastructure? Can the Minister also assure the House that the government has made an assessment of whether there is any risk that Xinye, on behalf of the Chinese government, has deliberately sought to run down the plant and jeopardise the UK's capacity to produce steel? Mr. Speaker, we are in a precarious position, and it is not as if the warnings weren't there. In 2022, the defence think tank RUSI said, domestically produced steel is used in defence applications, and offshoring the supply chain may have security implications. For example, in a scenario where multiple allied countries rearm simultaneously at a time of global supply disruption, such as during a major geopolitical confrontation. The fact that Xinye has now closed down the supply of raw materials is further evidence that it should never have been sold to them in the first place. And quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, the fact that it is some Conservative MPs calling for a nationalisation really shows just how through the looking glass we really are. It is abundantly clear, isn't it, that as far as the Conservatives are concerned, on national security, they cut troop numbers by 10,000. On food security, they undermined our farmers with unforgivably bad trade deals. And on economic security, they have left our country with almost no sovereign steel capacity. The Conservatives left our island nation's security severely vulnerable, like flotsam in the sea, left passively bobbing up and down, or being bashed around by the tidal pools of international events. That's not correct, by the way. And as for the honourable members of the private limited company, Reform Limited, well, I think they have a bit of cheek to claim to support UK steelworkers whilst cheering on their pal President Trump, whose punishing trade war is putting those steelworkers' jobs at risk. Perhaps the company's directors who sit on these benches may want to come clean about whose side they are really Mr. Speaker, times and again, we have seen the failures of an ad hoc piecemeal approach to industry across all of our sectors, from the failure of our water companies to the shocking state of our national housing and the dismal situation facing our health service too. For too long, there has been no stability for these industries, which are constantly fixed on a short-term basis, only to the point where they are practically held together by bits of string and tape and the dedicated workers who still remain. We Liberal Democrats stand ready to help constructively bring about an outcome that delivers real change.
That's a problem.
Diane Abbott.
Mr. Speaker, some of us today have been surprised to hear the opposition talk about a failure to prepare. The workers of Scunthorpe might say the opposition had 14 years to prepare and failed. British Steel's products are essential to industry, to this country's security, and to the delivery of major infrastructure programmes across the country, including in London. British Steel supplies Transport for London with the power rail London uses on the transport network, which is not currently manufactured anywhere else in the country. For railways like the Underground, power rail from British Steel is essential to the everyday operation of the service, which supports up to 4 million customer journeys each day. The closure of British Steel would have a very serious adverse effect on Transport for London services, as it would have a serious effect on projects up and down this country. So, above all, Transport for London believe in the importance of a UK-based supply chain for steel. Finally, everyone in this House understands that this bill is not about bringing steel into public ownership, whatever the opposition asserts. But some of us hope that moving on to nationalisation will not be ruled out. All of us on this side of the House believe in what works. But when it comes to privatisation, it certainly does not always work. The water industry comes to mind. Since privatisation, not a single reservoir has been built. Instead, billions have been poured into the pockets of shareholders. Now our waterways and rivers are floating with raw sewage, and it is the consumer that will have to pay exorbitant charges going forward for investment that should have been made all along. So this House supports the government in moving to save British Steel and to save the jobs of thousands and thousands of workers. And this House supports the government in moving so quickly and with such certainty to protect this country's interests, to protect its interests in relation to security, and also to work to save the community in Scunthorpe. Because one of the issues about deindustrialisation is the long-term effect on many communities up and down the country. So we all support what the government is doing.
Edward Lee.
I've just come off the phone talking to Tom Smith, the convener, trade union convener at the blast furnaces, on behalf of my many constituents who work in Scunthorpe next door. And my primary concern today is with the nearly 3,000 people who work in this plant. Let's be clear, we've been making the best quality steel in the world for 135 years in Lincolnshire, and we intend to go on doing it. We are not going to allow cheap, inferior Chinese steel to kill off our industry. The workers of Scunthorpe are breathing a sigh of relief. Now, we can be party political. I have to say, I thought the chair of the Business Committee made an excellent speech just now. He was positive. He talked in strategic terms. I don't know what the Liberal Democrat spokesman achieved by constantly attacking the Conservative Party in what is a very complex issue. Of course, we can be criticised because we sold this company to Jingay. Yes, I agree. But how many voices over there were speaking up at the time. And were they speaking up when Greg Clark, our business secretary, paid the wages of the Scunthorpe steel workers for many months? Were they speaking up when we saved Sheffield Forge Masters? This is a highly complex issue, and we should be working together. So I support this bill. Now, I know that we can be critical of the government. Perhaps we should have acted.
That was Edward Lee. That is Edward Lee there, Tory MP for Gainsborough. This is, of course, an emergency recall of Parliament today. This is to discuss the steel industry special measures bill. This is Bev Turner on the weekend on GB News. We will be responding to this debate in just a moment, so do stay with us. I've got a great panel here to work out what this will mean for the British people.
Taken by government, there has to be a sunset clause. We are given unprecedented powers to government. We can criticise them for not acting sooner. But this is just a sticking plaster on a gaping wound. Let's be honest. Steelmaking in this country is under extreme stress. And why is that? Why are we loading the most expensive energy costs on our own steel production? Why are we paying, why is Scunthorpe paying almost twice as much in energy costs as in South Korea or in America? High energy prices make UK steel expensive to produce and uncompetitive versus our European counterparts. The average price paid by UK steelmakers for 24-25 was £66 a megawatt hour, compared with the German price of 50 and the French price of 43. We are making our own steel industry uncompetitive. We have to stop these green energy costs. We have to be realistic. I see that the Secretary of State for Net Zero has now left, but get real. You know, we can take it into public ownership now, but if we go on loading these costs in our industry, we will be coming back month after month, year after year. So, we will support this bill. We want a sunset clause. But we have to get real about China too. Was it not obvious for weeks, indeed for months, that this company, this so-called private company, there is no such thing as a private company in China. They're all under the cosh of the government, under an autocratic regime. What do they care about the steel workers in Scunthorpe? What do they care about our national interest? So never again, colleagues, must we allow a strategic industry like this to fall into the hands of the Chinese, the Russians, or anybody else. I'm going to give way. I'm going to finish in a moment. I've made my point. So, just try and... Oh, I'll give way to the Honourable Lady. Go on.
Extremely grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. I would just like to ask him to clarify whether he was aware that the Chinese company that is now in possession of British Steel was actually sold it by a Conservative government of which he was a part.
Well, of course I'm aware, because I've just said it. I've just admitted that it was a mistake, but I've asked everybody here, what were they saying at the time? Of course, silence. Silence. It's easy to be wise after the event, but I'm worried about my steel workers. I'm worried about their future. I'm not worried. Of course, our former leader, yes.
I just want to make sure he puts the record straight. Some of us on this side warned the government then it was the wrong act.
Well done. Very well. Some of us apparently warned the government. I don't know how many, but we now know what is the true nature of our Chinese friends. So, we support the bill. Let's make our steel industry really competitive again. Let's make Great Britain great again.
Can I just appeal to everybody? There's a lot who want to speak. There's going to be some disappointment. Those who actually are going to be affected, I think, should be allowed. But let's see how we can go for time. We need to be brief to get more members in. Let's have a good example. Melanie on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'm delighted to follow the honourable member for Gainsborough, who I think, with his Damascene conversion to socialism today, could be termed the new Red Ed. I welcome the decisive action from the government today, bringing security for workers at Scunthorpe, grasping the nettle after the can has been kicked down the road for far too long. British Steel at Scunthorpe is not just of interest to that town, but emanates across northern Lincolnshire to my constituents of Great Grimsby and Cleethorpes, whether directly or indirectly. The employment and training opportunities that come from that single site are so important to our local economy. And the product, of course, is nationally important. And if I think about the businesses operating across the Humber and northern Lincolnshire, the industries that are relevant to securing the future of steel seem strong, from the Siemens factory in Gould to the boatyards of Hull and offshore turbines off the Cleethorpes coast. The products that Scunthorpe could have a role in producing are plain for us all to see. And those are the next steps the government must turn its attention to, because the measures today are not without risk. And unless we set a course for steel in the UK that closely aligns with our industrial strategy, this will only be another sticking plaster for a site that has already been put through the ringer too many times over the years.
Will she give way?
The powers the government seeks today will protect the workers at British Steel from any retaliatory measures that Jingye may have sought to take, which is welcome from those workers who have often felt at the mercy of the owners of the company and unseen by government. I give way to the honourable gentleman for Durham.
I thank the honourable lady for giving way. Will she agree with me that one of the major ways in which we could secure markets for British steel is by the British First strategy that the Ministry of Defence has stated for the building of future warships?
Rocker, has somebody texted a photograph out of here of what's going on? This morning. Okay, can people please not take photographs or text them? I don't know if it's the case, but your name's just been associated. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I agree with my honourable friend. It is imperative that we tie all of the initiatives that this government is bringing forward, whether that is in defence.
Very good afternoon. Welcome to the weekend. It's me, Bev Turner, with you this afternoon until 3 o'clock. Now, if you're still with us, well done, because the issue of British steel is not necessarily that gripping. We are going to make it so immediately now. We've got to work out what this is all about and what it means for the British people. I'm joined in the studio this afternoon, I'm delighted to say, by Michael Brown, former Conservative MP for Scunthorpe. Michael, thank you so much for being here today. And also Matthew Torbett, very familiar face to GB News viewers, former Labour advisor and the editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, as well. Gentlemen, right. Let me start with you, Michael, because you were the MP for Scunthorpe back in the days when the steel industry was flying in that area. What has it been like for you this afternoon to sit here listening to this? This is an emergency measure. It's not unprecedented, but it hasn't been done for 40 years that Parliament has been recalled on a Saturday to discuss something so urgent. This is a steel industry special measures bill. It's been described by the opposition today as a botched nationalisation, is how they're describing it. Jonathan Reynolds, Business Secretary, actually hasn't gone as far as to call it a nationalisation. He's talking about looking for a commercial partner to keep the industry alive, to save those 2,700 jobs in the area. But your assessment of the situation, particularly given your superb understanding of the historical context, Michael?
Well, a quick bit of history. I was elected in 1979 and the Conservative Party in government did make a serious number of redundancies. I think there were over 12,000 steelworkers on the day I became the MP, but by 1981, after a very damaging steel strike, we have had subsequently a very responsible workforce. The trade unions have always behaved extremely responsibly right the way through after that experience of the 1980 three-month steel strike. Since that reorganisation in 1980-81, the steelworks survived and thrived throughout the 1980s and the 1990s. But we are where we are today and quite rightly, I have no quibble with the government doing what they're doing today. I would rather, as Edward Lee said, the MP for Gainsborough that you had on the debate just now, I would rather that they've just simply gone straight for nationalisation, but I forgive them maybe doing it this way. The most important thing is to stop that steelworks blast furnace, those 2 steel blast furnaces, from cooling down, because that will be the end of steel making by blast furnace, virgin steel in Britain forever.
Which seems in a sort of ludicrous concept that if the lights go out, they can't be turned on again. And this is because it's such old technology that we're using in that particular...
You cannot switch a blast furnace off and then switch it on a week later, a day later, a year later. You have to keep it going 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, all the way through. Those steel workers work on Christmas Day, Easter Day, whatever day it is. And when a blast furnace, unless it's gently brought down and called for refurbishment, which happens from time to time, these 2 blast furnaces will have to be refurbished during the course of the next 5 years. But we have to keep a virgin steel capability, because all the railway lines in Britain are supplied by this works. And if we're reliant on China for imports doing that, imagine what will happen. Industrial use of blast furnace-made steel is essential for a manufacturing industry in this country.
So what's happened here, Michael? And genuinely, let's do an idiot's guide.
Yeah.
Because this isn't... The British steel industry is something that not many of us... certainly not my area of expertise. Xinjiang, the Chinese company that own this particular blast furnace, bought it in 2020. And
yes,
around about the time
that's right, 2020,
when everyone's
yes.
looking in another direction.
Yeah.
They came in and bought this. They're now saying this is not sustainable, we can't turn a profit, and therefore we're just going to turn it off. And that would leave us, therefore, very vulnerable to having none of our own virgin steel whatsoever.
We would be the only G7 country not to have the capacity to make virgin steel. And if we are expecting to deliver on the government's promise of economic growth in this country, we would be wholly dependent on foreign imports largely from China. Now, the reason I think that we are seriously in a mess at the moment is due to the net zero targets. This country, as Edward Lee said in that speech just now, the best speech I've heard so far, he said that the price of electricity for the steel blast furnaces in Scunthorpe is more than twice the average elsewhere in the industrialised world. Why is that? Because we are beating our breasts and saying, isn't it marvellous? We've got green electricity technology. But all we're going to be doing is exporting the environmental disadvantages of not going to net zero to China. Now, when they have blast furnaces in China to make the steel that we'll import, the air's still going to be... the air doesn't stop at China. The dirty air doesn't stop at China. So we do need to say to Mr Miliband, and I hope the Prime Minister will further restrain Miliband from any more of this nonsense.
Well, we've just heard that he's already left the chamber.
Well, he needs to hang his head in shame, because I'm not blaming him for the total situation in which the government and the country finds itself in, but he is a major contributor that's added to the difficulties of making steel making in this country so uneconomic. And he's the MP for Doncaster, just down the road, only a stone's throw from Scunthorpe, so he should know better.
So in a way, the ideology, the net zero agenda that Miliband is so completely obsessed with, means that we will have energy costs in this country that means that British Steel will never turn a profit. Now, if we, the taxpayer, are subsidising that company, we as a country will be disadvantaged. We've got ourselves into this awful bind, actually, Michael. And can you explain how this has happened?
Well, it's not wholly. I think the Chinese company Xinjiang have a lot to answer for, and I have no problem with the government taking the quite draconian powers that they're taking in this bill. I think this bill will pass without a vote. I hope it does. And I think that this will give the government a breathing space to then nationalise the company, and then the government will have a direct vested interest on behalf of the taxpayer to make sure that some kind of control over the energy costs, leading to the possible movement of Miliband from that post in the first reshuffle that I hope Starmer will be making in the course of the next few months.
Michael, thank you so much for that context. We've got Matt Torbett and Henry Hill still with me in the studio, but we are going to go to those in just a moment. But let's go now straight to a steelworker from Scunthorpe, Rooney Bulmer. Good afternoon, Rooney. There you are. We can see this debate continuing. I know it's not exactly edge of your seat stuff, but I imagine you have been rather captivated by it because the implications for you are enormous. What is your response this afternoon?
From what I've heard, I think we need to take action as soon as possible. We need to nationalise it to secure our future. And when you say about the 2,700 just being at risk, it's not only them, it's their families as well that come with it. And it's going to affect the whole community. We need to take pride in our steel, and it's pride for our country to have our own steel. Instead of getting from elsewhere, and the taxes on the imports are going to be sky high. Why not get it in our own country? I think there have been some great points made today, and we need it for our railway, for everything. We need to try and tackle the situation now before it gets too late.
Rooney, in a country where actually a lot of young people consider their job to be making TikTok videos, there's something rather nostalgic and meaningful and good, actually, about being involved in industry where you are producing something that is as important as steel, the most important material in the construction industry, in all infrastructure, in fact, in this country. So just give me an idea of what the community is like in Scunthorpe and how this industry doesn't just, as you say, affect the people that work there, all of the other subsidiary services that you must need and require and use in Scunthorpe.
Exactly. I mean, it's going to be a drastic effect on us. I've not known this town without the steelworks, and I think I'll live long enough to see it still here. It'll be here for as long as I live, and it was here when my grandparents were here. Do you know what I mean? It's the history of this town, and without it, we're a ghost town, in all honesty.
And so for you, Rooney, what you desperately need, is for the government to find, as they're saying, a commercial partner to keep this open. But did you conclude that even though Jonathan Reynolds didn't go as far as to say this would be a nationalisation, completely renationalising, that's obviously what you're hoping for, and you see that as the route to job security?
Yeah, I mean, it's just we don't know when there's so many rumours going on, so obviously we hear what's going on the news, but the rumours you hear just on site between other workers, you hear something new every day. It's so unsecure. We need a sense of security in our lives.
Yeah, it must be very difficult. Rooney, thank you so much for joining me. That's Rooney Bulmer there, who is a steelworker from Scunthorpe. We're going to go straight back to Westminster because Christopher Hope has a guest there, our political editor. Good afternoon, Chris. Who have you got? And just your reflections, really, on what we've heard on this unprecedented day of Parliament being recalled on a Saturday.
Hi, Bev, and great to see you too on GB News today. Yeah, exactly. A real historic day, I think. It'll go on for quite a long time. A bit of a debate there between the Tory party and Labour over who was to blame for this crisis affecting Scunthorpe. There will be little support for those the guests you're having there speaking to us live from Scunthorpe, people who work in the plant, but certainly concerns about why on earth this plant was sold to the Chinese in the first place. Now, the Tories earlier, Graham Stewart, a former trade minister, he said, didn't he, that they would rather that the Chinese company put money into the plant than the taxpayer, but that's changed completely, I think, in the wake of the Trump tariffs and the concern now about having sovereign steelmaking in this country now has a different urgency it didn't have under the last government. But with me now is Christine Jardine. She is a front bencher from the Liberal Democrats. Christine, what would you do if you were in government now?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is ensure that this bill goes through and that we keep the lights on in Scunthorpe until we can find a way of keeping our sovereign steel industry going, because that's what's at stake here. And we have to make sure that all options on the table are considered and that nationalisation is a last resort. But the first thing is to turn to a European market, because they were our biggest market. It's been very difficult since Brexit, so we need to re-establish some sort of customs union with the European Union so that we can trade more effectively with them. And we have to put pressure on the United States to bring down this steel tariff, because, as you say, that was the last straw. This has been mismanaged for years now, and that it's come to this stage that we've have to come on a Saturday to keep the British steel industry going is ridiculous. And, you know, I think the previous Conservative government has a lot of questions to answer.
Is it really Brexit's fault? Is it not a fault? Is it not the case of just international steel dumping? China makes 54% of the global steel. We make 0.3% of global steel.
I didn't say it was Brexit's fault.
What is it?
I did not say it was Brexit's
said,
fault. I said, but it's been very difficult since Brexit because that was our biggest market. Now, that's just a fact. It's been more difficult to deal with it. Yes, the Chinese have been dumping steel. They've been able to do that. It's been very difficult for us. They've been able to dump cheap steel in the market, which has made it very difficult for the British steel industry. And the solution you asked me for is we have to trade more with Europe again. We have to build up a customs union, and we have to find a way of persuading Donald Trump that these 25% tariffs on steel are damaging, because we need to be producing steel in this country. The other thing we need is for the government to ensure that all our infrastructure projects, building at Heathrow, this theme park we're going to get from Universal, our railways, anything that is built for the North Sea, for the renewables industry, it all has to be done with steel made in this country by British steel, and we have to be very careful. We've heard that the Chinese owners have been very difficult over the negotiations. We have to start thinking very carefully about who owns our vital national assets and protecting them.
Who's going to pay for this? This plant loses £700,000 a day. Is that on us now as taxpayers?
Well, what the government is putting forward today is a way of keeping the plant going until we decide and we can find a way forward. All options need to be on the table. We need to look at every possibility of, another buyer taking it over. But nationalisation would be, in my opinion, the last resort. But what we have to do is find the best option we can to keep British steel going and keep Scunthorpe open.
And just very finally, where does it leave net zero? Ed Miliband coming under some fire from the Tory benches in there. Do you think net zero is, the idea of net zero is obviously against what we're doing in Scunthorpe today, which is bailing out a polluting steel plant?
No, because we need that steel if we're going to build the structures that we need to reach net zero. But that is another area where we have to be very careful about Chinese investment, because traditionally if you build a wind farm, then the company that manufactures and installs it has control. Do we really want any foreign power with control of the on-off switch on our energy? I don't think so.
Christine Jardine, thank you for joining us today on GB News. Christine Jardine there. The Lib Dems sound like they're going to vote for this bill, but the question in the future is nationalisation and who might pay for it.
Thank you, Chris. Christopher Hope, they're one of our viewers getting in touch on GBnews.com saying that Jesus won't even save us from Labour, my friend. That was in response to the person in the background with their placard there. We are going to be talking a lot more this afternoon about this reaction here about the steel, the emergency debate about whether the steel industry should be saved in Scunthorpe. And we're also going to be hearing our reaction, my panel's reaction, to Rishi Sunak's resignation honours list. You don't want to miss that. Don't go anywhere. Quick break.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody
in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Westminster, the ultimate clique. And you're fighting like rats in a sack. But here on the Camilla Tominey Show, we ask the questions the establishment media is too scared to ask. OK, let me ask you a straight question, because I know you're a straight-talking politician. Whether it's net zero, illegal immigration or law and order, nothing is off-limits.
You had the power then.
Yeah, as I
and
say,
now you've lost it.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show that's fearless.
But no, let me finish my question if you don't mind, because it is my show.
Sundays at 9:30, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend. It's me, Bev Turner, with you until 3 o'clock this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me, whether you're listening on the radio as you potter in and out of the garden or whether you've got us on the TV. Thank you for being with us. Now, it's a big day, actually, for a Saturday. We've had this emergency recall of Parliament today in order to discuss the Special Measures Bill, the Steel Industry Special Measures Bill. One of the main speakers today, of course, was Andrew Griffith, the Shadow Secretary of State for Business and Trade, and he is now with our political editor, Christopher Hope, for Westminster. Chris.
If I were going to recommend...
That's right, Bev. Joining me now on College Green outside Parliament is Andrew Griffiths, the Shadow Business Secretary. Andrew Griffiths, this problem was caused by your government selling this plant to Chinese owners in 2020.
Well, look, there's no question that the issue of today is what should happen going forward. You know, the plant has had a number of owners over time. The reality is that thanks to enormously high, ruinously high energy costs in particular, steelmaking in this country is a real challenge. So the question today was, how did we get here? Why could the government not have dealt with this sooner? Many people have been saying for months there were problems with the supply chain. If the government needs these emergency powers, why did it not step in rather than recall Parliament, do so when Parliament was sitting over the last few weeks?
How will your party vote on the measure today? Are you going to accept it with maybe amending it slightly to allow a sunset clause, a clause to end these government powers to run a plant?
Well, the debate's live now, and we'll have to see how that debate goes. You're absolutely right. We've put, these are unlimited powers. They give the infinite time period. So we've said, look, if the government's going to take these exceptional powers I can't remember being taken in peacetime on a Saturday via recall of Parliament, then at the very least we need a sunset clause so that they don't last forever until the end of time. That seems to be a very reasonable position. We'll see how the government reacts to that amendment that I and colleagues have laid.
If your party were still in power, of course you're not after the July election last year, would you be nationalising the Scunthorpe plant now?
Well, look, the reality is we've now got this botched nationalisation. It's the Secretary of State for Business who will be ordering workers to shovel coal into furnaces, and it's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, using taxpayers' money, who will be on the hook. So that nationalisation has happened. We wouldn't have done it in this way. Parliament hasn't had a chance. We've seen no numbers, no effect of the impact on public finances. Who's going to be paying the bill for this? We know the Chancellor had really very little headroom from the moment she sat down on her last emergency budget. Even less headroom today. When is she going to come and give an update?
But isn't she responding, isn't the government responding to the changed international order? Now we have these Trump tariffs of a ground level 10%, 25% on British steel in Scunthorpe. Is that not what's happened? The world has changed, this government's policy is changing too?
Well, look, there's a number of headwinds that clearly affect steelmaking. Another is the government's increase in national insurance costs, which is going to put up the cost of employing labour for every business, and of course, a business like British Steel, that impact, just as their 300-page red tape employment bill. So there's a number of headwinds, and as I said before, it's not easy to make steel with the high energy costs in this country. The fact that you've got an extended supply chain, that rather than getting that coking coal from down the road, it's coming from halfway around the world, which is another reason why the government's had to be in such a desperate hurry today.
I was struck by what Edward Lee, the Father of the House, said in the Commons, and of course your speech also was notable, but what he said was the cost of making steel in this country is £64 per megawatt hour. It's £50 I think in France and maybe £43 in Germany, but certainly on the continent it's much cheaper. Does this whole drama, and why we're here on a Saturday, call under pressure the whole net zero agenda?
Yeah, look, I mean, Ed Miliband was looking pretty sheepish when I raised exactly that point. But now is the moment. This is an absolute wake-up moment. The government needs to recognise steel is the first domino to fall, but this could be chemicals, concrete, cars, all sorts of industries are facing real challenges because of the ruinously high cost of energy in this country. The net zero policy, Kemi's been very brave, has talked about that. It's being dishonest, it's not plausible, and it is time that the government now acted while we still have some industry left.
Could you explain briefly, simply for our viewers and listeners, what was going on? Why was Kemi Badenoch intervening on when you were meant to be speaking later?
Well, when in government, it seemed pretty clear that we had advanced negotiations, not concluded because they were ongoing, but negotiations ongoing with what was the British Steel's preferred option of having a blast furnace in Scunthorpe and one up in Teesside, where they've got existing steel facilities. The government, it's alleged, came in, cancelled the Teesside element of that, said to...
That's Labour government.
This government, cancelled that element or encouraged British Steel to double down on Scunthorpe, which wasn't their preferred option, and that, as a result, seems to have contributed to them walking away and not being able to conclude a successful negotiation. In contrast, Port Talbot, where the government, again, put some money in to try and help that transition, is going to be a viable steel plant going forward.
And that, of course, is denied by the Labour government, and so it goes on. But very finally, yesterday, the government's given another £350 million in aid to Ukraine. That figure now £4.5 billion in taxpayers' money going to Ukraine. How long will that cheque be written, do you think, by this government? I know you support the government's approach on Ukraine, but we have got problems here. We've got the Scunthorpe plant, we've got hospitals, we've got roads being filled, we've got a high level of attack with withdrawn benefits for pensioners. Is the case for Ukraine still being made, and should it be made?
Look, I think it should be made. I think we all benefit from security, and there is no security unless there is ultimately a peaceful resolution in Ukraine, and that will affect us all, whether it's in energy costs or just general uncertainty. But look, you make a good point, and one of the concerns that we have about today is it is a blank cheque. It is a botched nationalisation. We're at a point when it looks like there is no alternative. We've entered a tunnel with only one exit, but the government needs to set out the costs of that. Ultimately, it will be people in their winter fuel payment, pensioners, perhaps the people on disability benefit, hard-working taxpayers. They're all going to be paying the price for this, and the government haven't laid out a plan.
And very, very finally, what is that price? What are you estimating the cost of nationalising British Steel will be?
Well, easily running into the billions. And of course, the government at this time do not have billions. Rachel Reeves has already spent 70 billion.
How many billion?
I don't know. I literally don't know. The government, Chris, have not set out the numbers. One of the process failures, as well as giving Parliament across the road just 90 minutes to read this exceptionally important bill, is that today they've laid out no numbers. We do not know what it'll cost. They've asked Parliament and British taxpayers for a blank cheque.
Andrew Griffiths, thank you for joining us today on GB News. There you go, Bev. We're on the hook for billions as a result of a likely outcome from the vote here to take back control of British Steel and probably, eventually, nationalise it.
Christopher Hope down at Westminster, thank you so much. I'm still joined in the studio by former MP for Scunthorpe, Michael Brown, who has a fantastic historical understanding of this situation there, and particularly the people of Scunthorpe, and also Matt Torbett and Henry Hill are still with me. I will get to you, gentlemen, don't worry, we are here till 3 o'clock. But Michael, while I've got you, I just want you to impress upon our viewers and our listeners the timescale that we're looking at here and why this is such an emergency.
Right, the government is absolutely right to have recalled Parliament and put this legislation before the House today, because the Chinese owners of this steelworks have been deliberately starving the steelworks of the raw material, coking coal. They haven't been ordering any, and we are days away, if you believe what, and I do, if you believe what you read in the press over the last 2 or 3 days, if the government doesn't take powers to force order by law the company to feed that blast furnace, then we will be up the kibosh.
And then it's gone.
And it's gone. Gone. That's right. So I have no problems with the fact that the government have taken this action today. They're absolutely right, and the bill will go through, quite rightly, I suspect, unopposed. But we are days away from losing the last vestiges of virgin steel making in this country, unless this bill passes.
I think this is one of these issues, Matt Torbett. You're on Britain's Newsroom with me every week. We never really talk about British steel. This has been quietly deteriorating in the background with the most enormous economic and social consequences, particularly for that area, but also for the whole country. How come we've managed to neglect this as a topic for so long?
From an optics point of view, it's not sexy. It doesn't grab the reader or the listener or the viewer, potentially. I think there's an element of communities obviously feeling forgotten about. I think we saw the brunt of that born during the Brexit referendum. And I think this issue does seem to come around every so often, but always at panic stations. And, you look at Port Talbot and places like that. And I think that's probably why. And you see why people feel neglected. They're fed up with the status quo. They feel that people don't care about them. And I must admit, listen, I don't talk about it. It's not my expertise as such. I do think there's remnants, actually, of part of the 80s and the deindustrialisation that we've had in this country for many years. Andrew Griffiths probably had a lot to answer for there, as Chris Hope put him under the spot.
Yeah.
I think you can go further back. British Steel came about in 1967 under Harold Wilson. Margaret Thatcher privatised it and floated it on the stock market, and I think that's when it began to dwindle, and we are where we are today.
So you'd be a fan of this being completely renationalised?
I think so. I think I can see what the government are trying to do. If you're trying to do a sort of public-private part ownership whereby the government has a big stake in it, but you want to bring in private expertise and business expertise. It's very well known that many of the Cabinet, or none of the Cabinet, have ever ran a business, and I think to have expertise is great. But the problem is with business people, they want to make a profit, and at the moment, as we've heard, this plant is losing, is it £600 million a week, a day, or something, ridiculous levels of loss making. I think there's no choice but to move to a nationalisation for the benefit of the workers, for the community of places like Scunthorpe. And I think, actually, Ed Miliband's not the most popular person in the room, obviously, but I think the world appears to be going, whether people like it or not, towards cleaner energy, towards, whether it be net zero or whatever you want to call it, a cleaner type of thing. With the government owning it outright and having a nationalisation stake in there, you can potentially look at moving to hydrogen levels of steel making, from what I can recall, and therefore being able to sell that to people and ensuring that it survives for years and years to come. We don't want to be revisiting this at Christmas or next year and whatever else.
Henry, in November 24, Miliband banned new coal mines, including coking. There was a coking mine in Cumbria as well, because he wanted to send a new global signal. Where does this leave net zero now? Because what we're realising is we are very vulnerable as a country to external international decisions.
I mean, I think the basic thing it shows up about net zero is simply the fact that, and I support the headline goal of net zero. I think Britain having a clean energy grid is a really important goal to strive for, just to be clear. But it proves how much of the way we currently do it is basically just crooked accounting, right? Because as you said earlier, if you manufacture steel in China, not only do you have all of the emissions from running a blast furnace in China, but you then have to ship it here, right? And international shipping is one of the most polluting industries on Earth. Coking coal is the same. We should make sure that anything imported, the carbon cost of production and transport is included against net zero targets.
OK, great. We've got a lot more time. I'm with you till 3 o'clock this afternoon. Do not go anywhere. This is Bev Turner on GB News with The Weekend.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with Skyroof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
4.2 million people in this country are living in hygiene poverty. That means they are having to daily make a choice between putting food on the table for themselves and their family, paying the rent, paying their bills, and buying the basic everyday essentials we all rely on.
And there must be such a stigma attached to, well, there is, we know that, to hygiene as well, because this isn't talked about. I mean, we're talking here this morning, 1 in 12 British people have to make a decision between eating and washing, but we never hear about that, do we? It's not spoken about.
You're absolutely right. We have, scarily normalised the conversation about food poverty and fuel poverty in this country. And what my charity, the Hygiene Bank, wants to do is to take one step on that road to ending hygiene poverty by abolishing VAT on soap, treating it as the basic staple that we all need every day. It's the first line of defence against illness and disease. Helps to keep us all safe.
And it's a confidence thing as well, isn't it? If people are really struggling, and that can affect your confidence and mental health and all the rest of it. But if you also know there's even the slight possibility of not smelling fresh, for example, but I mean that can totally destroy you in a workplace.
Completely, and we hear every day about children who are bullied in school or who are not going to school because their uniform isn't clean or they feel stinky. They're being bullied by their peers. We know that 13% of people living in hygiene poverty have avoided work for exactly that reason. 9% of people have avoided going to a job interview, and that's so wrong because it is trapping you in your difficulties. Hygiene poverty is limiting life chances, it's blocking opportunities, it's stopping people find a way out of the hard times they find themselves in. And the thing that I always remind myself is that we're all actually only one step away from this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Very good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 12th of April. This is The Weekend on GB News with me, Bev Turner, while Dawn takes a weekend off. Now, it's been a busy day, given that it's a Saturday, particularly. MPs remain locked in their emergency debate on the future of British Steel in Parliament. The Business Secretary has gone as far as to say that nationalisation remains a likely option for the government. We're going to be having all the reaction and a lot of other stories on this lovely Saturday. We're going to cross live back to Westminster now, where our political editor Christopher Hope has a Shadow Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Victoria Atkinson, and Lord Craig McKinley. Chris.
That's right, Bev. We've got Victoria Atkins here, the Shadow Environment Secretary, and of course Craig McKinley, known well to the channel, and also the chair of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group and also running the Global Warming Foundation. But to you first, if I can, Victoria Atkins, why are we here?
Well, on behalf of my constituents in Lincolnshire who work at Scunthorpe, I'm here to try to safeguard their jobs and also to ensure that we have a future for British Steel. The reason we're here today, however, is because this Labour government has sat around doing nothing for months. They inherited a deal with us, a set of negotiations from the Conservative government that they could have taken forward. They chose not to. And now we have this panicked recall to Parliament whereby they are taking extraordinary and draconian powers in this piece of legislation, basically a botched nationalisation where we don't know how much it's going to cost us, we don't know what the long-term impact assessments and the assessments of the ongoing run operations of these plants. None of this is available to us because Labour have botched this and brought it in a panic.
And they, of course, blame you. They blame you for selling it to the Chinese in the first place, they blame you for allowing the situation to carry on, and they blame blame you for where they are today.
Well, again, rather like they like blaming everybody else, don't they? And I'm afraid the public are growing very, very sceptical and running out of patience with their excuses. But I would just say on the future of British Steel, we had a plan in place. Negotiations were ongoing, of course. They were interrupted by the election. Again, that's our democracy in action. Planning permission had already been granted for an electric arc plant in the northeast. That was part of the plan.
Is that Teesside?
Teesside, exactly right. And Scunthorpe was to follow. And yet this government has apparently taken instructions from its unions. And if we saw the performance today in the chamber, we had Labour MPs braying and jeering as though it was a day out at the races for them, when I'm afraid I represent constituents for whom this is very, very serious. And so we need to, I'm all for a cross-party understanding on this, but they need to accept that they've missed this for a couple of months now, for several months, and they've done nothing, and now suddenly they are panicking by bringing this back to Parliament.
But at least they turned up. The government benches were full. Yours weren't. I reckon two-thirds of Tory MPs were there. Barely that.
Well, a lot of our Conservative MPs are out today campaigning on the doorsteps because of the local elections, including, of course, Greater Lincolnshire mayoral elections. But I'm here as a proud Lincolnshire MP. Several of my colleagues are as well. And we have to be realistic. You know, we have this government elected on a sliver of the national vote, but with this super majority, they are able to ride roughshod over the usual democratic processes. And sadly, we're going to see this today. My question of the Labour government is this setting a precedent for botched nationalisations of other industries?
Yes, but all parties are campaigning local elections, but Labour's turned out for this. But to you quickly, Craig McKinley, you in your role in terms of scrutinising net zero, does what's happening here now draw into question the target of 2050 and that net zero target?
Well, completely. I mean, previous governments, and particularly this government, they're almost celebrating when we shut down things that emit CO2. Suddenly, with the unions on their back, 2,700 jobs, I feel for each one of them. This is failed net zero policies in action. Now, what I would like to see today, I mean, I don't suppose, we're not going to object to this, but it is a very strange backdoor route to nationalisation with us, the taxpayer, on the hook for any amount of money. There's a very strict indemnity clause in there that means you and I will be paying for no matter how much this costs. But what I would like to see is some common sense applied to this. To make steel through a blast furnace requires a lot of coking coal. We had the ability to start a new mine in Cumbria, all agreed under the Conservatives, obviously with a bit of internal debate at the time, but we got there. What did Ed Miliband and his department do? Scrapped it, closed it, gone for good. And that's what they're doing with other sources of energy across this country, ordering the concreting over of a potential fracking well. This is sort of a botched halfway house industrial policy just to appease the unions. You and I will be paying for it. For heaven's sake, if you're going to do this, let's open a coking plant so we can at least do most of the job domestically with that golden word of energy security. But I'm afraid Ed Miliband seems to be ruling the roost, I'm afraid, in the Labour Party on a botched energy policy. This is another one.
How much are we on the hook for, do you think? £700,000 a day losses, that's on our back accounts from tomorrow. What else will it cost, do you think, if we get a full nationalisation?
Well, I mean, I hear the Scunthorpe plant is quite an aged plant. It will require probably many billions to actually get it back up to scratch, but we'll be reliant on importing coking coal, importing iron ore. I mean, that is what we're on the hook for now into the future. So we're relying on the goodwill of others to supply us the coal to keep this plant going. Because as you know, blast furnaces, if they go cold, they're completely finished. They have to be run permanently from the day they started to the day you end up finishing them. That could be 100 years or more. So, this is a very serious day for backdoor nationalisation, a load of money for the taxpayer, and yet another obvious failure of a net zero policy.
But haven't things changed post-Trump tariffs, 25% on British steel, 10% across the board? Aren't things changing? This government is moving in line with that. We need to have some sovereign-produced domestic steel. But given that, Network Rail relies on 95% of steel from Scunthorpe for its tracks.
No, I don't disagree with that at all. I absolutely fully agree.
So why are you attacking it?
I'm attacking it because I think there was a better deal available, but they've botched that. And I think this also comes into very stark contrast with international uncertainty. Is it really sensible to have countries like China owning some of our fundamental resources that are important to our naval shipyards and steel for railways and everything else? I think the tariff effect of Trump perhaps is being seen quite clearly here.
And just finally to you, Victoria Atkins.
Whether this will reassure your viewers or not, I suspect not. Think about this. On Monday, Jonathan Reynolds, the Business Secretary, is going to be in charge of the operations, and Rachel Reeves is going to be in charge of wage bills.
Yeah.
I leave that with your imagination.
But to be fair to you, be fair to Labour, what would you have done in this situation? Let's leave your bath out of it, Craig McKinley. What would you have done if you were in power here? You've got a Chinese company, by all accounts, is about not to pay for the coal. We're told by the government they would have gone cold and stopped working this week. You'd be in the same position now, wouldn't you?
No, we wouldn't. No, we simply would not, because, as I said, we were in the middle of negotiations, but also we had the plan in place. 3rd of April last year, planning permission was granted to British Steel for their electric arc plant in Teesside. That plan was there. Labour chose to throw it away, just as they chose to throw away the plan that we had with AstraZeneca, the pharmaceutical company. There are parallels here. They were given this really positive investment programme in relation to AstraZeneca. This government did nothing, and then they're surprised when a major business such as AZ walks away. I'm afraid this is beginning to be a pattern of behaviour by this government, and of course private businesses, as we know, are paying the price for it, and of course we as bill payers, but also consumers, are paying the price for it too.
Well, Victoria Atkins, Shadow Environment Secretary, and also Lord McKinley, Craig McKinley, of course, from the Global Warming Foundation and the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, thank you for joining us today on GB News. There you have it. Conservatives say it's a botched negotiation. That, of course, is contested by Labour.
Thanks, Chopper. Great to see you on a Saturday afternoon, and nice to be here on a Saturday afternoon. You've got Bev Turner this afternoon, and I have also got Matt Torbett in the studio and Henry Hill. Right, fellas, let's just take a breath. It's been a busy hour on this show, taking all of this in. Henry, let me come to you first. What do you make of this whole situation? There's so many questions we could answer here. Who is to blame? What are the solutions? And what is going to be the best outcome for the British people and the taxpayer?
So who's to blame is, as we heard, a very long story, and you can dispute various points. But the ultimate question is why do we need to support this plant now? Because it's not economically viable, right? So why is it important to do that? Because virgin steel-making capacity is one of the just fundamental things, especially if you're a country that's talking big on defence. The only other... Someone said it's the only one in the G7. We'd actually be the only country in the G20 other than Saudi Arabia unable to make virgin steel.
And why is virgin steel important? Because you can have non-virgin steel. Right. Why do we need the virgin version?
Right, so you can take recycled steel and you can use electric arc furnaces, which are green and much lower emissions, and you can remake that into a secondary, like basically a lower quality steel.
Right.
The problem is that virgin steel is higher quality, and that means that for defence critical infrastructure, if you're building a bridge out of steel, you probably want to be building it out of the best steel you can, especially if you're a politician whose constituents are driving over it. So that's why you need it. But also just defence applications, right? And it's something where if we lost it, even if we changed our minds the day afterwards and we're like, right, we need to get this back, this is Britain. It would take forever, right? Can you imagine the government process of, like, setting up a new plant, having the contract process that they'd obviously mismanage, the planning challenges, right? So it's really important that we save this, but...
In case we need bombs and tanks.
Yeah.
And if we need bombs, tanks, bullets and guns...
Railway lines?
Or railway lines. But I'm just thinking from a military point of view, if we end up going to war with Russia, let's just pull that out of the air.
Oh, God.
China, at the moment, controlling our steel. China would side with Russia in the event of any sort of military conflict. China would therefore not be giving us the virgin steel that we would need to fight back against China, Russia and various allies. That renders us so incredibly vulnerable. It's incredible to me that this wasn't foreseen. We've just seen Victoria Atkins there and Craig McKinley doing it wasn't our fault, even though we were in government for 14 years. It was clearly a long-term Conservative decision to run this into the ground.
Honestly, and maybe I would say this, the Conservatives absolutely can be blamed for many of the ways they've handled it, especially for allowing the penetration of Chinese companies into critical sectors, right? Because it is simply a fact that because of the way that the People's Republic of China is run, every major company has a CCP cell. There is no such thing as a truly private big business in China. Therefore, if you're letting them into steel or telecommunications, you are giving the Chinese state a vector. It is important to note, though, it is important to save this plant, but steelmaking capacity is capacity, right? It's not something you either just have or don't. If we were to end up, as you say, fighting Russia, one of the things that we're seeing from the Ukraine war is that actually what matters is Russia's vast output capacity, right? Like, when they knock out a German tank or a British tank...
They build another one.
Or a jet. Well, no. Yeah, they build loads. Their tanks are worse, right? But they build loads of them. We build very, very expensive bits of kit that have huge chunks, and then they hit one, and so sometimes they get blown up, because they do, and then we can't manufacture them enough. So actually, if we wanted to have that level of steelmaking capacity, we wouldn't just need this blast furnace. We'd need several more, right? And that's the capacity issue that we have.
And we can't build any more, Matthew Torbit, because we're so obsessed with the green net zero agenda, because making steel requires coke and carbon, but much less of carbon. And we don't anymore produce our own coke that would need to be melted, again, not my area of expertise, in order to create this virgin steel, which is so durable and resilient. So we're in a catch-22 situation.
I think a little bit, and I don't know if it's paused for reflection of who we are and where we are in the world, because I think you alluded to it. China and America run the world, right? You can paint it however you want. They run the world. Massive global economies. India isn't far behind these days. And we're at the behest of international decisions, whether that be tariffs, whether that be China dumping steel throughout the worldwide global ecosystem. And I suppose it's the question to go, what are we? Who are we with? What do we want? Several leaps that you made. However, if we ended up in a wartime situation, but I don't think it's a million miles away, to be perfectly honest, who are we going to be with? Who can we trust anymore in the world? The amount of bad faith actors, I think, in leadership positions across the world is terrifying in many ways. And therefore, what do we do? What is the industrial strategy for this country? We've not had one, really, I would argue, for the last 40 years, since the deindustrialisation of since the 80s. So therefore, what do we make? We're a largely service-based economy of about 86%. We rely on basically sandwich shops and small businesses. So I don't know what we are anymore, and therefore, it not being my area of expertise, but I don't know whether we need to have a little think about where we're heading. Are we going to be the world leaders in net zero? I don't know. There are much bigger economies, like, ironically, China, that are moving that way a lot quicker than us. So I don't know.
Well, Rishi Sunak gave his AI advisor a knighthood, didn't he, and his resignation on it, so that tells you a little about our industrial strategy. So what happens now, do you think, Henry? Because this bill will get voted through. Nobody will object to it this afternoon. The government is saying that Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, was saying very clearly that he needs to find a commercial partner to make this viable. If he can't find that commercial partner, then we as the taxpayer will do what? Or the government will do what? Because Zhizhe, is that the name of the Chinese company that own it at the moment? The value of the company is zero, effectively. It has no value. They will just have to give that over to the government?
Effectively, the government could seize the company, right? Especially if you've already got to the point where you're literally forcing them with special legislation to have to keep their own furnaces on. You've kind of done it anyway. That Rubicon has been crossed. But the taxpayer is going to eat the losses either way, right? This is a loss-making plant. Now, either the government nationalises it directly, which means that, and it is important for the local communities and everything else, but that does mean that whatever those hideous costs are, they are going to be borne by the taxpayer. But if you find a commercial partner, and there are good reasons for that, in that they might know how to run a steel business, which none of the cabinet do, they're not going to sign up for taking massive losses, right? And so the government's going to be eating those losses. There's no commercial partnership, which means that we're not eating this plant's losses, right?
And that is largely because of our crippling energy costs. So if there is some way that Miliband can row back a little bit on his net zero project, when he left the chamber early, not surprising, if we can somehow reduce our energy costs in this country, then is there ever a time at which this plant could turn a profit, do you think?
I honestly don't know about whether it could realistically, within a 10 to 15, 20-year horizon, turn a profit, just because... You know,
at least break even?
Places like China have vast, you know, in terms of, like, you know, slave labour, amongst other things, have the ability to drive down costs across their economy in ways that we can't necessarily. But we can definitely get the costs down, right? Because, why is this so unviable? It's largely energy costs. Now, ministers of both parties will be like, oh, but, you know, global energy markets. But every country is exposed to global energy markets, and we're still vastly higher, right? And so there are things you can do. The challenge, I said before, the goals of net zero, but the challenge with intermittent renewables like solar and wind is that you need to have a non-intermittent grid for when, so if you had 100% solar and wind grid, you'd also have to have a 100% non-solar and wind grid as backup.
And we have no storage capacity.
We don't have storage capacity, but that means you're baking in lots of additional costs. Now, if you were to go all out for, say, nuclear, right? Nuclear is green, it runs for a very long time, and if you can capitalise it and build fleets at a time, the way that, say, South Korea does, South Korea builds several plants at once, that gets very cheap. And if you manage to crush the cost of energy, you'd hugely boost the cost of living and manufacturing. Of course, what's Miliband doing? Miliband is taking our entire stock of plutonium and he's proposing to spend a lot of money burying it.
Listen, we haven't talked about the role of reform in this. Ed Davey and the leader, Daisy Cooper, deputy leader of the Liberal Democrats, made a big fuss during that debate to basically get some political capital out of reform, saying that anybody in this chamber who has supported Donald Trump, who has imposed tariffs on this country, should apologise to the House. Ridiculous, pathetic, not the time to make that point. However, Matthew, Andrea Jenkins is going to be standing as the mayoral candidate in northern Lincolnshire, which includes this area, and Reform have been quite clearly saying that they would want to nationalise this steel plant. Is this just Labour trying to be more reform?
I wouldn't say trying to be more reform. I think there's a fear. There's totally a fear. You know, we'll wait and see. I've heard whispers that Keir is going to do an immigration reset in May. Well, that'll probably be post-local elections when Reform have won a lot of seats and he can say, I've listened, you know, this is what we're going to do, the public have spoken sort of thing. What I would say is Reform have got... Nigel can touch on the pulse of this country in a way that not another leader currently can. And by that, I think he recognises areas, and there is parallels again with the EU referendum, of people that feel let down by governments, plural. And I thought it was a very clever photo op they did in Scunthorpe in the week, where it was Andrea Jenkins, it was Nigel, it was Richard Tice and others posing in front of the blast furnace saying we're going to nationalise it. I also thought it was him moving to the left of Labour on Thames Water, his comments on Thames Water saying, you know, we wouldn't nationalise it, we'd just let them go bankrupt and then we'll take it off them because they're making ridiculous profits. To see Keir Starmer go and visit the plant in Scunthorpe yesterday seemed to me a reaction that I don't think we would have seen if Nigel wasn't there, and there is a real fear. It's politics, right? I feel Nigel is someone that masquerades as a workers' champion. I think him and Reform are all about big business, they're all about wealth, they're all about pushing the blame onto certain scapegoats. They're not really for people like me. However, he's a good actor, and Keir Starmer isn't, and this is where we're at the moment with Reform, I would say.
OK. Let me just read out the other candidates for the Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire Combined County Authority. The Green Party, Sally Ann Horscroft. Reform UK, Andrea Jenkins. Marianne Jane Overton for the Lincolnshire Independents, Lincolnshire First. Jason Stockwood, Labour and Cooperative Party. Rob Waltham, the Conservative and Unionist Party. And Trevor Young for the Liberal Democrats. Right, I think we're going to take a very quick break now. We are going to be talking about some other topics this afternoon, including former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's resignation, honours list. Matt and Henry will give us their opinions on that, and I will give you mine too. Don't go anywhere. This is GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it? Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and he did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend. You've got Bev this afternoon until 3 o'clock, and I'm delighted to say that I have got Matthew Torbett here with me and Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill. We are watching this debate. It's still going on in the Houses of Parliament this afternoon. In the Commons, an emergency debate, a recalling of Parliament, which is very, very rare on a Saturday. This is a special measures bill for the British steel industry, particularly, that, of course, that plant in Scunthorpe. Scunthorpe. I went a bit northern then, didn't I? And we've also got other stories we're going to bring you this afternoon. We're just waiting because I believe Nigel Farage is going to make a comment in just a moment, so we will bring you that when Nigel Farage speaks. In the meantime, Matt, should we have a little look at Rishi Sunak's resignation honours list? Now, there are a few things that, well, a lot of things make my blood boil these days, but one of them particularly is the cronyism of politics. And let's just tell our viewers and our listeners who Sunak has given these commendations to. Give us an example.
Well, we've got Alistair Jack. He bet on the general election, sort of insider trading, if you will. We've got Mark Harper, guy that's responsible for HS2 not going up north as Transport Secretary. Yeah, who else have we got? We've got
Michael Gove.
Michael Gove's an interesting one because there's 2 of these people I've actually got a bit of a soft spot for. I always thought Michael Gove was one of the most intelligent people in Parliament. Some of it, he's very good at reforming. You can argue whether it was good or not, and I would. Very impressive, got things done. I do always feel a bit uncomfortable about people who are editors of some of our media outlets being also totally embedded in the political process of making legislation.
This is the editor of The Spectator now, isn't he?
Exactly. I think if he wasn't, yeah, fair enough, I suppose he's had a long career. And I've always quite liked, and I get on very well with James Cleverly, who I think is a decent bloke.
He's got a knighthood. Gove has got a knighthood. Interestingly, the Mirror, the Daily Mirror newspaper, has gone with the picture of Michael Gove in a nightclub on the front page and says, Lord Gove, really? On us for cronies.
Yeah, well, this is the thing, and I will totally caveat with this happens on the Labour side as well, and I hate it. It is those that are the nearest and dearest, who in many ways, particularly on our side, you know, are deeply average individuals, haven't really done very much. And I think lots of this stuff, whether it be the Lords, you want really sort of more experts in there, whether they've been great in business or communities or whatever for the last few years. And the same with the OBEs. If you're just going to give it to a long list of your former staff members, you know, I think it cheapens the sort of honest system, which I think lots of people probably feel the same way. Every year we'll have both leaders give who they're putting up for it, and it's like the list of the world's worst people at times. And you go, oh, really?
I know. And of course, what will happen is that all of these people will all go onto the after dinner speaking circuit. They'll get paid 5-10 grand an evening to go and turn up to somewhere with the Sir or the Lord before their names. And should they, Henry?
Oh, on the after dinner speaker circuit. I mean, frankly, that's a question of either one, having a very good agent, or two, being lucky to have quite sort of clueless people commissioning you, right? Like, I don't know how many people actually get that.
Sir Jeremy Hunt.
It's, you know, fair enough. It's really good. I'm really pleased to see the Mirror, especially, like, defending the dignity of the House of Lords. You know, we shouldn't have members of the House of Lords in nightclubs. It's utterly unbecoming of the dignity of the chamber. I think, in general, knighthoods and so on, fundamentally, yes, there is a danger of you dilute them. I think that they are important, but ultimately, it's harmless. You're giving someone a little bit of metal and a ribbon, like, I'm not going to get stressed about it. The House of Lords is a more interesting one, right? Because, like, on the one hand, you're giving someone a seat in the legislature for life. On the other hand, it tends to be the case that the more familiar someone is with the House of Lords, especially now after New Labour's slashed the Commons sitting hours to much less, is it does vast amounts of work. It's more important to the Constitution now than it was 20 years ago. And the question is, however much we might not like politicians appointing Lords, someone has to appoint them. And if it's not politicians doing a process that we can criticise, it's going to be some anonymous quango that we have no accountability over, appointing people that we haven't heard of. So I think it is good that we have the mix. I think the one, generally speaking, this is a list of his close supporters when he was in office. It's completely conventional. I did suggest at the time that he should have declaimed a resignation honours list, because I think Liz Truss didn't deserve one. I think the thing is, I've got no problem with resignation honours in general, but if you're going to have chop and change Prime Minister this much, my thing was like he should say, I will only have a resignation honours list if I win a general election.
Yeah.
Right? Because that way he has at least, like, earned it. But the ones that's going to raise eyebrows is Simon Hart.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Because Simon Hart was his chief whip, who then went and wrote, not quite a tell-all book, because the names were omitted, but there will be lots of people in Parliament who can jigsaw identify the people in those anecdotes, or some of the people in those anecdotes. And it's a fundamental attack on the Whip's office, because the whole point of the Whip's office is that MPs who are vulnerable to blackmail, can go to the Whip and get discreet help, right? Sometimes we all sneer at the Black Book and we think maybe everything should be completely transparent, but the point of the Whips is that if someone is vulnerable for their own stupidity or not, they can go and they know that they'll get support. And now they have to worry that somebody like Simon Hart, the next another chief whip, will put it in a book. It was a ridiculous decision for him to publish it, and I think that then rewarding him, as Rishi has, is absurd.
One of the ones that's also been criticised is a BEM, which is different to an MBE. Did you know that? That's a medalist of the Order of the British Empire as opposed to a member of the Order of the British Empire. It has gone to the head housekeeper at Chequers. Now, Emma Patterson. I don't have a problem with that, in a way. If she is the woman who's had to pick up Sunak's underpants off the floor and make sure there's fresh towels for the guests...
Deserves a medal, yes.
You deserve a medal for that. Because I think sometimes the people behind the scenes, those who can't go on the after-dinner speaking circuit for 5-10 grand a time, those are the ones I'm very happy to see, those hard-working people that keep the government running, even if it is just unstacking the dishwasher or making someone else unstack the dishwasher. I'm OK with those people being rewarded, Henry, in a strange way.
I do think it's strange. I'm absolutely fine with it. Ultimately, there's always going to be an element of the honours system, right, which is the person who is the head housekeeper for the Prime Minister gets a BEM, where maybe somebody else who is the head doesn't get it, right? There's always going to be that slightly personal element. But actually, if I had to choose, I like to see that the Prime Minister has at least thought about the people, made his life work, right? It's not just a list of his mates and his allies. He's actually at least remembered, oh, OK, there were these people behind the scenes making my life easier. That's entirely a good thing, actually. I don't think it's objectionable at all.
Yeah. Right, I think we're going to take a quick break. As you can see, this debate is still continuing in the House of Commons today. Very unusual for a Saturday. If you're just waking up blurry-eyed, it isn't Monday. It is Saturday. I am Bev Turner, and don't go anywhere. We're talking about in just a moment as well the fact that airports could soon be scrapping boarding passes completely. You will not be able to get on a plane unless you have one of these and it's charged. Don't go anywhere.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast every day from 6 a.m.
You two met. I mean, since we last saw each other, then you two have done Strictly. And,
Yeah.
But the fact that and there's quite an age gap.
51 years.
51. And yet...
I'm his granny.
You're his granny. But the fact you clearly get on really well and you've stayed in touch and you've developed a real friendship.
We really do. I mean, we live 5 minutes from each other. We speak most days, and Angela had this amazing campaign with Let's Dance, and obviously I was very, very much supporting that. And when you just get on like a house on fire, we just do. We get each other. We have great banter. And like you said, there's 51 years between us, but we feel like we've known each other for 51 years.
You have a particular interest in getting dance back into schools, don't you? I mean, your own experience of this, because your dad is a professional footballer, and you actually won a place, didn't you, into the football academy? It was sort of expected that you were going to be a footballer.
Yes, it was. I was expected to be a football player naturally because I was the eldest son, and Southampton wanted to sign me in the Premier League, and they still are. No, I chose to be a dancer, and it was because my dad and mum sent me to dance classes because I was very hyperactive as a kid. I was pretending to kick a football all the time. They sent me to my next door neighbour's dance school, and the class was called Tango Tots. I somehow ended up being a dancer and had to tell my Geordie dad when I was 12 years old that I wanted to be a dancer.
How did that go down?
It went fine. It's not like the film, not like the film, but it's very, 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 very supportive. And obviously the brother ended up being the football.
But you're very keen to get dance back into schools, aren't you? Tell me why.
I'm so keen, because for kids that can't afford it, why not just give them the opportunity to learn to dance? We live in a world today where we're on the phones, we're on TikTok, kids are learning to dance anyway, so why not regulate it and let them learn it in school for free?
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Bev Turner. Now, have you ever been stuck in an airport waiting for check-in, lost your boarding pass, or even missed your flight due to the long queues? Well, good news, that could all soon end. As you can see, I didn't write this script because I think this is an absolute nightmare, because aeroplanes and airports are going to be reliant on a digital system. And I am delighted to say that Simon Calder is here in the studio to explain this to us. Before we go on to this, Simon, why haven't you had an honours yet? Why are you not? Simon Calder, MBE, OBE, Sir Simon Calder, for your services to travel.
Because, Bev, I do exactly the same as you, which is make life as difficult as I can for the people in power so that they look after us. So, I'm behind you in the queue, which
I'd rather be in our club, wouldn't you? So what's going on here? You bought some boarding passes.
I have. Well, I'm just going to give you... I know you're all way too young, but in the olden days, you used to have an airline ticket.
Still love it.
Piece of paper, look at that. They tear out the coupons and everything else. And then you got your passport.
Yeah.
OK. Now, the idea is that within years, and we can argue about how many years, that will all be gone. You know that already when you book a flight, you're going from Manchester to Malaga, you can book the flight in 2 seconds. But then, that's only the start. You've then, later on, got to check in. So you book a flight, basically saying, I'd like to travel, and then they say later on, oh, do you want to travel? And so you'll now get something called a journey pass. And when your passport and your phone finally get integrated, so you've got a proper digital passport, then it will say, oh, that's Bev, yeah. And you'll be walking into an airport, you won't need to do anything. Facial recognition now so good that, for instance, I've got identical twin sisters and it can tell them apart. And actually, it's really only the family who can do that. So facial recognition is very good, all merges together and you just breeze through and you get to the gate and they say, oh, Bev, welcome on board. And that's it. So
it sounds horrific.
Why?
Calder.
Why?
Because there's nothing more frustrating than computer says no, technology breakdown. And as we know, these systems and services are deeply unreliable. Yeah. Even on a very basic level, if you can't pay your parking because the app is not functioning, or whatever it is, there's not a human being to talk to. Yep. I've travelled recently with my other half. We went to Morocco. And, of course, you get to the check-in. And we hadn't done the check-in online. Yeah. We deliberately didn't do it because I quite like to sometimes... Well, I like to talk to people. I know that's old-fashioned.
We've noticed.
I quite like having a chat with the person
of course,
when you're checking in. And actually, sometimes I have done the check-in. I don't like going to those machines where I have to weigh my own bag. Why am I doing someone else's job when I'm not getting paid for it? I don't want to decide where I'm going to sit. I want someone to do all of that for me. In this era, this brave new world of digitisation, I just see stress, inconvenience and a system that when it goes wrong, goes horribly wrong and you can't talk to a human being.
Yeah, I know. Bev, I think, if I may, you would be most comfortable back in the 20th century with your paper ticket, with your passport, with a nice check-in person who's smiling at you and so on. Smile, for goodness sake.
Good to know.
That's you, Henry Hill. House for the EasyJet, you'd be fabulous.
Yet... Actually, things are going exactly in the opposite direction. I'll take your point. You've covered, of course, on GB News, things like the e-gates falling over all the British airports, endless airline IT failures. And yet, the direction of travel is still really clear. And the thing which has actually accelerated was, and I'm sorry to mention it, COVID. Yeah, do you remember, to get anywhere, you had to have 17 different apps on your phone. Yep. You had to have QR codes. You had to say, in Henry's case, oh, yeah, I've had me jabs and here's my certificate. And I had my test yesterday and here's that. And the whole idea is that your whole world, your whole permission to travel is going to be on your phone and that's the only way you're going to get around.
But you know what gives me faith, Simon Calder? I don't know whether you saw recently, but Amazon had these shops, have these Amazon Fresh shops. Yeah. Matt Torbett and Henry Hill are still with us as well. These shops have had to close down and their expansion plan has now been given up. Because you know why? No one's using them. And that is dependent on facial recognition. There's one in Richmond that's just closed down. There's the first one in East. And that depended on exactly what you talked about. You walk in the shop with your app and it would beep and the shop knew and the shop would see what you were buying and then you would go and all that would happen is the money would go from your account. Guess what? People don't like them.
Well, I don't know about Matthew, I don't know about Henry, but I love them. It is the only shop I like. I can get in on my way to work, I can get my lunch and be out in 45 seconds, thank you very much, which is the maximum time I want to spend in any shop, obviously. So, I love it. Yeah, of course. And honestly,
you're going to get that knighthood if you keep talking like this. You're on message with the government and the AI tech bros.
No, I think there will be, and you won't be among them, but there will be a constituency of people who will just say, take all my personal data, have me on 47 different databases, follow me around so that you're not just following me around Heathrow Airport, you're following me into Amazon and everything else. I don't mind if it's going to make my life easier. And I think I'm slightly on that side.
Matthew, where are you on this?
I have questions. I think if it's going to be linked to your phone, you do well to not have your phone snatched in London these days. Does that mean you lose that element of your passport? Is it up in the cloud? Therefore, how much power do Apple have over the rest of your life and stuff like that? It's easy to say, fail to prepare, prepare to fail, but you're going to get people's phone batteries dying and stuff like that. Therefore, are you able to show? Is it linked to an email as well? The Amazon Fresh thing is very interesting, actually, because there was reports in The Guardian last year that Amazon actually denied. But apparently it was nothing to do with AI. It was 1,000 manual workers in India that would watch you walk in, and they were working behind the scenes. Totally, it's all a facade. The facade. Last year, people can go away and Google it, and Amazon vociferously denied it, but someone had looked into it, or a whistleblower had come forward, and apparently it was 1,000 workers manually doing the whole. He's picking that up. They're going to buy that. Put it in the till sort of thing.
That is brilliant. I mean, I wondered how they did it, because honestly, you don't need to. You put everything in your bag, and you think, oh, I'll have that cheese sandwich. You put it in, and then you think, actually, I feel like a ham sandwich today, so you put it back, and then you get another one. Initially, I used to kind of religiously check it to make sure that they got the fact that I put the cheese sandwich back, but they're just brilliant.
And that's what worries me, is when these systems go wrong, there's no form of recourse. As a customer, you are irrelevant. And that's why I wouldn't go in those Amazon shops. Well, also, I just hate this.
Oh, go on, Bev, come along with me. Watch me. You can time me. You can be outside with a stopwatch.
You can take me for lunch anytime you like, Sir Simon Calder, but you're not taking me to an Amazon Fresh, I can tell you that. Henry, where do you sit on this fourth industrial revolution, which we're having stop, start, and I don't think that Amazon Fresh is a perfect example. I don't think the British public want it.
Well, I mean, I think I obviously, mostly only flew after 9/11, so I hear about what travel was like in the oldie days. Like the Edinburgh to London flight, where you just apparently would walk in on the tarmac and you'd buy your ticket in your seat. Like
a boss.
We should just do that.
Sorry, just to be a historical archive for a moment, it was the shuttle and later the super shuttle, and you could turn up at the gate 10 minutes beforehand, no ticket, nothing. You just walk on board, and then somebody, like a bus conductor, would come round. I know bus conductors are a bit 20th century as well. And sell you a ticket, and it cost an absolute fortune. It was terrible.
I would pay for that sort of service, Simon.
It's demand management, but fundamentally, go back to pre-9/11 flying anyway, please, fundamentally.
Yes.
But I think the thing on this is the Amazon Fresh thing, obviously denied by Amazon, is an interesting example, because I heard the same thing about the e-gates, right? Is that actually the e-gate is a security officer on the camera,
watching,
because that, at least if it can't do that, the first couple of times if it doesn't pick it up, then it transfers over. And it's like, because how many workers does it take to follow you around individually compared to just staffing the tills properly, right?
Well,
but I think the ultimate thing is, you're right. If you have it all on your phone, there are huge vulnerabilities. Are we getting then rid of paper passports? Does this mean that you can't travel on a paper passport? Because if you can travel on a paper passport, you still need all of the infrastructure.
We're just going to stay with us, gentlemen. We're just going to go back to the House of Commons. I think Nigel Farage is about to stand up and he's there talking to Chopper. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello, Bev. Here's Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage, you want to nationalise British Steel. Who would pay for it?
Well, it won't cost anything to begin with, because it ain't worth anything. It's very interesting that, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, said today that Jinghe, the Chinese company, were acting in bad faith. Well, you know what? Richard Tice and I, and to be fair, Ian Duncan Smith, were saying this 5 years ago. Don't sell it to the Chinese. I've also learnt today there was quite a good offer on the table from the biggish firm of Turkish steelmakers, and yet the Johnson government opted to go for China, which is extraordinary. More on that in the next few days. So we have to take it over, or we fail to be the only major country in the world that is not a primary steel producer. So all very dramatic. Tice and I went there in the middle of the week. We made a big statement. We said there were 3 working days left to save the steel plant. They've opted for a Saturday sitting for the drama of showing the working man and woman in Britain that Labour are on their side. But of course, they allowed Port Talbot to close last year. So that's what today's all about. It's all a bit of theatre. It's Labour saying, look, aren't we the heroes? We're saving industrial Britain, without recognising that actually there is a manufacturing disaster going on. Aluminium gone, cement gone, refining going. Our net zero policies are literally deindustrialising Britain.
Is it being driven by your pal in the White House, Donald Trump? 25% tariffs on UK steel?
Nothing to do with it. Have you noticed 25% tariffs on aluminium's not being discussed? Do you know why? Both the plants are closed down. And steel, we've only got one left anyway. It's nothing to do with that at all.
You got an amendment to this bill today. You want to prompt an immediate nationalisation of British Steel. Well, you might peel away some Labour MPs to back that.
Well, let's see what happens. I just think today's a short-term long-term sticking plaster. You know, if you're working with a company that the business secretary says publicly are working in bad faith, just get on and do it. Nationalise it, take it over. Find it cheap energy, because that's the biggest problem that manufacturing faces, and then let's try and get some buyout specialists to come in and take it over.
Expensive though, losing £700,000 a day. We're spending billions on Ukraine. We've got 5 years left on each of these two ancient blast furnaces. One of them is nearly 100 years old. I mean, is this really a business you would buy if you were actually in the private sector?
Don't trust the figures the Chinese are giving you. They haven't published accounts since 2021. They're having us over. They're having us over, and they have for the last 5 years.
What's Reform up to? Why is it saying nationalise British Steel? You're seen by many as being a right-wing party, a low-tax party, but you encourage greater state intervention. Are people getting you wrong?
Well, because we're patriotic. We're patriotic.
But you can't be that. There are bills at the end of the day. You can't just wave the flag and say everyone's going to accept it.
Family, community, country. This would devastate Scunthorpe. Now, say this was an industry that was an old dying industry, we'd have to accept it and find something for 3,000 families to do. But it's not. I mean, the government last week announced a great big theme park in Bedfordshire. That's going to need tens of thousands of tonnes of steel. They've announced an increase in defence expenditure. That's going to mean more steel. I mean, we're the only major country in the last decade and more whose steel production has collapsed as dramatically as us. And frankly, it's the Conservatives that put net zero into UK law, decided that China was going to be the great ally for the future, and sadly Ed Miliband and others have continued with it. So look, we see this as a vital, strategic, national interest. We need it, and that community needs those jobs too.
I was watching Ed Miliband, the Climate Change Secretary, on the front bench. You probably saw him from your position too. He looks a bit queasy. I mean, is it all unravelling net zero? Luton Airport expansion, saving British Steel. We're shipping in coal from Japan to keep it going, not using coal in Cumbria.
Well, quite. I mean, everyone can see how ludicrous it is. There is a perfectly good anthracite mine in Cumbria that could produce this coal. And when we were there in Scunthorpe in the week, Richard Tyson and I, they said we'd much rather use Cumbrian coal than be shipping it in from the other side of the world. So, in some ways, I think what's really happening is this. The public are waking up to how stupid these policies are. This mass wave of idiocy that's overtaken all the...
But you've got grandchildren. This is for them that we're doing it, isn't it? That we're suffering now for them, aren't we, Nigel Farage?
No, this makes no blooming difference at all. If you look, when Redcar closed down in 2015, right, big steel plant, 2,800 jobs. Redcar closes, and the firm that closes it announced the next day they're opening in India, and they'll ship the products back to Newcastle. That makes CO2 output worse, not better. Net zero, by the time of the next election, could be the next Brexit.
You once called for a referendum on net zero. Do you still want one?
Well, I was just teasing them, really. I was just teasing them. No, this could be the next Brexit. And what I mean by that is where the political class are just hopelessly out of touch with where the rest of the country is.
And just finally, Donald Trump, a lot of this goes back to him. You're playing the game. You're not talking to the White House. You're trying to support Keir Starmer. But shouldn't you be giving him a ring and just say, come on, give us that trade deal?
I've been very, very, very careful about this. When Trump was in first time, I was an MEP in a very different situation. I'm now representing a party that is right up at the top in the opinion polls. And if I was to be talking to him or members of his team, that would be seen to directly cutting across what the British government's trying to do. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. We might meet socially somewhere, but I'm not going to do that. But I'll repeat the point. If the government ever want my help, I'm on the end of the phone.
Well, 9 seconds left. Bev Turner, do you have a question for Nigel Farage, very briefly?
Oh, you put me on the spot there, Chopper. What would I ask him based on today? Let me ask our panel. What do we want to know from Nigel Farage? It's very difficult because we're talking about... We can't go on, Henry. Go on.
Yeah. So if you use the steel from this plant for British defence, British manufacturing and so on, you still have the fact that it's uneconomical, right, which is why they're shutting it. So if you do that and nothing else, are you not simply passing on all of those costs to make British defence procurement less efficient, to make that theme park more expensive, to make it more expensive to build in Britain?
The question for our panel then, Nigel Farage, is if we do use the British steel and we use it for the defence business or for the Bedford Universal site, is that not passing on the cost to industry? It inflates the cost of all of our steel.
Well, number one thing to say is that the quality of steel that's being produced at Scunthorpe is pretty much the best in the world. So quality, particularly for military equipment, hey, and you know what, for big parks and everything else, that matters too. No, if we get energy prices right, it'll be competitive.
OK, Nigel Farage, thank you for joining us today. There we are, Nigel Farage there with his why he thinks we should be nationalising British Steel. Apologies for jumping that on you, Bev. I thought you may have a question there, but good to see you there.
Don't you worry, Christopher. You can do that anytime. Now, listen, another story this afternoon. Have you ever watched a storyline in a soap opera and thought, am I being sold a message here? Is this government messages? Well, one journalist has claimed that he has found shocking confirmation that the government is, of course, doing this. So let's speak now to independent journalist and podcast host of The State of It, Lewis Brackpool. Lewis, great to see you this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, tell us how you've come across this information. You're a big fan of freedom of information requests, aren't you? So what's happened, Lewis, and what have you discovered?
Yeah, firstly, thank you very much for having me on, Bev. It's good to see you. This came off the back of a conversation with a friend over the phone, and he, in the background, had a particular soap opera just playing in the background. And whilst we were chatting, it mentioned a particular storyline referencing climate intervention. And he mentioned it to me and thought that was a little bit bizarre. And off the back of that, I did respond to him by saying that I do believe that the government has, in the past, collaborated with writers and embedded messaging within these fictional storylines about public health, climate, extremism or social cohesion, migration, all of these different topics. And I tried to find an article to back up my claims, because he did believe me, but I wanted to double check for myself. But I couldn't find anything. So I decided to put forward a Freedom of Information request to the Department for Culture, Media and Sport and ask for any agreements, contracts or documents outlining collaboration between the UK government and TV production companies since 2020. I focused on soap operas in particular that are watched by millions across the nation in the UK. I also asked for any strategy briefings where officials discussed embedding narratives on public health, climate change, extremism, migration, all of these topics, and whether any funding was given in exchange for incorporating specific storylines. And when I received the 20 working day reply, they're refusing to release it for now, citing Section 36 of the FOI Act, which is used when disclosure might prejudice public affairs. And now that they are conducting a public interest test, they say they won't make a decision on whether they will release the information to me until the 14th of May 2025. So it's not speculative. I'm not speculating or anything like that. This is legitimate, and I wasn't just pulling that out of my head. Yeah, now, we've seen these sorts of storylines. We've seen footballers dropping dead, I think it was, on Coronation Street. And in fact, some of this goes back quite a long time, 1990s HIV stories in EastEnders, maybe even drugs in Grange Hill. But I think the issue is that the public are not aware that they are being encouraged to engage in groupthink and mind manipulation. Isn't that the issue? Oh, Lewis, we've run out of time. Lewis Brackpool there, you can see his podcast, The State of It. I'm so sorry, Lewis, it was so brief, but I think it's a really important issue. My panel is still here with me, Matthew and Henry Hill. We might talk about that in a little while later. And goodbye to you, Simon Calder. Somebody on our inbox saying they would travel with you anytime, because it would be such a pleasure.
Ooh,
there you go. Send him that night, honey. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a minute.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, looking ahead, it's all changed now, certainly turning much more changeable across the UK. Generally, the wettest weather will always be out towards the west, but for all of us, certainly feeling much fresher. So the reason is we've got low pressure starting to dominate across the UK, and that's really going to bring in some bands of showers and also some rain at times. And that's what we've got as we end Saturday, moving into the early hours of Sunday as these bands of showery rain work their way eastwards across across the UK. So I think most of us seeing some splashes of rain at least as the night goes on, but with the cloud cover in place, certainly a much milder night than what we have been used to. I think most towns and cities staying up at least into mid-single figures. So as we start Sunday morning off in the south, a mixture of some cloud, maybe still some rain lingering across the far east. Where further west we will see some sunshine first thing, but showers already moving in across the very far west, and that will be a feature of the day's weather. Also some fairly bright conditions for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, where the further east you are still hanging on to some night-time cloud. But you can certainly see temperatures starting the day much higher than what we have had over the last few days. So moving into the rest of Sunday, really it's going to be a mixture of some sunshine, but also a few showers. The showers could be heavy and possibly thundery in a couple of places, with maybe the best of the sunshine in the afternoon across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and eventually maybe into parts of East Anglia and the South East. Temperatures certainly down on the last couple of days, so it's still reaching around 17 degrees in the far South East, so still respectable for the time of year. Into the evening, a fairly quiet night to come across much of England and Wales, also eastern Scotland, where out towards the west we're seeing another band of showery rain moving, and that's really going to set us up for a fairly changeable week across the UK, with temperatures trending back down to near normal for the time of year.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Courtesy of Marquis Leisure, you could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with skyroof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. And that's not all, as we'll also give you a further £5,000 in tax-free cash to make sure that wherever this motorhome takes you, it takes you there in style. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's 2 p.m. on Saturday, the 12th of April. This is The Weekend on GB News. With me, Bev, while Dawn is off on her holidays. Now, MPs are set to vote on whether to grant the government control of British Steel following fears of the plant in Scunthorpe that may be closed by its Chinese owners. We're going to be live in Westminster very shortly. And after a turbulent week for the US economy, the stock markets have rebounded as Donald Trump insists that his trade war with China is the right move. But with the dollar hitting a 3-year low, is the patience of the American people and his popularity starting to run low? And backlash hits former Prime Minister Rishi Sunak after naming several of his Conservative ministers and allies in his resignation honours list. I want to know from you, do we need to change how our honours system works to stop more political cronyism? I'm Bev Turner. This is The Weekend. So it is Saturday, and yes, there are MPs sat in the Commons today because they are locked in this emergency debate on the future of British Steel, with the Business Secretary going so far as to say that nationalisation remains a likely option for the government. We have been discussing since midday the implications of this, not only for the people of Scunthorpe, but for us in the UK. If there is to be a war, what do we do if we're not producing any more of our virgin steel, the most important item that is used in infrastructure and building in this country? Let's go live to Scunthorpe and get more with our reporter, Anna Riley. Good afternoon, Anna. What are you hearing down there?
Good afternoon, Bev. Well, there's certainly some cautious optimism, I would say, from the workers and the people of Scunthorpe that hopefully a deal will be done to keep steel in Scunthorpe. Of course, Scunthorpe and steel are synonymous. It's at the DNA of Scunthorpe is steel. The generations of families work at the steelworks, and there's 2,700 jobs at risk. And it's certainly something that the community has united over. I'm at a pub here in Scunthorpe at the moment. There's been a march that's been organised by a number of trade unions with workers and members of the public turning out to show in solidarity for the steel workers. They're heading to Scunthorpe United's football ground, where there'll be a game at 3 o'clock and in which steel workers will come on and wave their banners, and the fans will cheer them on and support them. And this is something that's been organised by the unions, as I've said, and they've all come together. Different unions from Unite, Community, GMB, there's all of them have come together in support of the workers here in Scunthorpe. I caught up with Alan Davies earlier. He's the National Secretary for the Community Union.
My own personal feeling is we're optimistic because it's unusual for a government to come out of recess when they've only just gone in. So that tells you that the government's taking it seriously. I'm just hoping that they come to the right decision. I understand it's just started now, so I'm missing that debate. But it will be interesting to see where this goes, because we need this plant for any infrastructure projects and growth within the UK. The unions have been together since day one up here. We listened to what Xingyi, the owners, had to say about their decarbonisation plans. They changed so many times. It was obvious to us from the start that this was not going to be a simple process. We've now then reached out to Syndex, who are our business specialists, and gave them another plan, which they've turned down to a point, which is disappointing because we knew that would work.
So certainly all eyes on Westminster from here in Scunthorpe. It's a crucial industry, steel, for the town and for the nation. We'll be watching on to see what happens in Parliament.
Thank you, Anna. Anna Riley there in Scunthorpe, and as she says, all eyes on Westminster. So let's go back to our political editor, Christopher Hope, who is there. Chris, for people who might just be coming in from the garden, maybe sitting down in front of the telly with a nice cup of tea, just recap for us, if you will, why today has been so significant.
Well, Bev, today is historic because we have Parliament being recalled for the first time on a Saturday since the Falklands War 40 years ago, and that's because the government tells us that the Chinese owners of the Scunthorpe steel plant has nearly run out of money. They're so concerned they need to provide state money to pay for the coal to ensure those furnaces keep running. So the MPs have been called back here with peers to try and pass the Steel Industry Bracket Special Measures Bill to give the government direct control over the plant. In a way, Bev, it's a halfway house between full nationalisation and private control. It means that, for example, Jonathan Reynolds, the business secretary, will have a say over hiring and firing at the plant. So, for example, if individuals are fired or let go because they don't listen to the Chinese owners, they can be reinstated by the UK government. It means also that Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, she's writing cheques now for this plant as it tries to find a leader and it's as a new owner, and it's losing £700,000 a day. So very quickly that bill will rack up for the taxpayer. Going forward, we're looking at what happens next. Will it be nationalised? Will a private business be brought in? The Conservatives, two Tories have told me it will cost billions and billions of our taxpayers' money to restore this plant. There are two blast furnaces. One dates from the 1930s, one from the 1950s. They'll need to be refurbished to give them another 20 years of life. That will cost lots of money. They've got 5 years left to run before they run out. But things have changed, I really think, although the government wouldn't admit this, the things have changed since Donald Trump brought in those tariffs. That was the big moment when 25% tariffs on British steel, 10% tariffs elsewhere. That means the UK government now sees a sovereign need to make British steel in this country. We're a tiny maker. China makes 54% of the global steel. We make 0.3%. But because we're now concerned about where we source steel in the future, that's why it's so important that we do it for the UK, not least to ensure our defence industry has the necessary steel going forward. As I speak to you, though, this bill has gone through the House of Commons. They have passed this steel bill. MPs voted to advance the short bill, we're told here in reports. That doesn't mean MPs are heading home now. They must wait around for the Lords to consider it, then it comes back to them. But as things stand, slowly but surely, this bill for the government to take back control and run British Steel in Scunthorpe is becoming a reality.
OK, thank you, Chris. Chris Hope there at Westminster. Let's speak now to the former government advisor on climate change, Tom Burke. Good afternoon to you, Tom. Now, am I right in saying you are the co-founder of E3G, third generation environmentalism, and you've advised various governments over the last 20 years or so to do what? What is the direction of travel that you think this country should be going in terms of its energy production?
Absolutely right that we should make sure we keep production of steel on board here, and absolutely right the government should do what it's proposing to do now and bail out this plant. But the real wake-up call is we can't keep on living as if we were still in the 20th century, and we now need to really think much harder about what kind of steel industry is going to work in the 21st century. And we're not going to have a renewables carbon-free electricity system without a steel industry, so we need to be thinking about exactly what kind of steel industry we need and how do we invest in order to build that steel industry.
Isn't part of the problem, Tom, though, is that we no longer produce our own coke, so we're having to have that sent over from China, and that is costly. And if we would just produce more of our own natural resources, we wouldn't be in this position.
I completely agree that it's silly for us to be importing coke from China. That's because we're using technology, as was pointed out in your package, from the 1930s. What we really need to be looking at is what do you need in the 21st century? It's perfectly possible to make steel without burning coke. You can make steel using hydrogen as a reductant for the steel. There technology is available to do that. We need to scale that up. We need to start deploying that, and we need to build the industry that is going to be competitive and contribute to our security into the 21st century, not just simply hanging on to the past.
So when you've said that to former prime ministers and cabinets and all the MPs responsible for these kind of issues, what have they said to you? We have time, doesn't matter.
People think that somehow climate change, you can wish it away by getting rid, as Trump is trying to do, of the word. Meanwhile, in our lives, we keep finding the climate's going to go on changing whatever we think. So, yeah, there's a tendency to think we don't have a problem with the climate, but also there's been a tendency to think somehow you can have globalization of opportunity without globalization of responsibility. And so we've been very happy to export essential industries like the steel industry and not bother about what we do when you've got rid of that industry. How do you build for the future? So we need to have much more responsibility for our future. That's the lesson that needs to come out of this particular event. We need to take care of our own future and not be reliant on somehow magic to produce it for us.
Do you think this, though, Tom, is going to be one of the final nails in the coffin of the net zero agenda? Is this waking people up to the fact that we just cannot produce enough energy in this country without using more fossil fuels?
People who think that have just got the story completely wrong. We have one of the best locations there is in the world to produce all the electricity we need from wind, largely from wind and renewables. Our links to the rest of the continent of Europe provide us with no problem about producing our electricity in the future. What we mustn't do is try to hang on to a past that doesn't work anymore. And that's the lesson that people should be taking out of this, not somehow to abandon the idea of a carbon-free electricity system. Whatever we're producing, steel or any other thing, if we're not actually in a carbon-free electricity system in the world going forward, it won't be competitive. It won't be delivering for our economy. So we really shouldn't get hold of a sort of fashionable phrase somehow that it's a good idea to abandon net zero. It's a really bad idea to do that. I don't see any sign, by the way, that the government is going to do it.
No, Ed Miliband seems to be just becoming more and more influential and powerful by the day. He did nip out, he ducked out of the debate a little early today. Is that because he is feeling the heat over this issue now?
I think the government's feeling the heat about a lot of issues, and this is one of them. I think it inherited a difficult situation. I think it's doing its best to cope up with it, but it's going to get things wrong. I mean, we should be investing in a steel industry of the future, not investing in a French nuclear power station that we don't need. Right now, we're in a situation where we really are stretched for money, and we're thinking about spending money on a French nuclear power station they don't think is worth continuing to build. Instead of doing what we ought to be doing, which is building a steel industry for our own future.
OK, fascinating. Thank you. Tom Burke there, a former government advisor on climate change. Can I just talk to you, Henry? Mm-hmm. Henry Hill's still here from Conservative. What did you make of that? Because we seem to have this sort of, we're at this junction, aren't we? And that we've had people like Tom talking about the fact that there has been an urgency to use renewables for 30, 40 years, which have been largely kind of ignored by subsequent governments. We're now at a real tipping point, it feels. The infrastructure needed to have more reliance on wind, solar, hydroelectric power, whatever, nuclear power even, is so vast. The timescales needed are so huge. We can't just switch over like that. And in the meantime, you've got this British steel plant in Scunthorpe literally looking at days before it might close.
Yeah, I mean, any time when somebody just keeps talking about, like, in the 21st century or the 21st century, the future, not the past, like, those are all, like, fashion statements, and you kind of expect politicians to say it rather than expert guests. Also, frankly, in my view, if you're green and you're anti-nuclear, you're just a crank. Like, I'm sorry, you need to have constant generation, even in a green grid, right? It's fine having intermittence. I'm pro solar and wind are great. They don't blow all the time. Nuclear is the clean energy that will give us a decarbonised grid, right? And if you're not pro-investing in nuclear, frankly, you're not pro-net zero in any practical sense. But you're right. Like, we keep talking about the green industrial revolution, right? It's a nice phrase. But think about the actual industrial revolution. It completely transformed this country, right? Like, cities sprang up from where towns were. We laid down the entire railway network.
Houses were built.
Right. Houses completely transformed shipping. Like, and the thing is, another industrial revolution could do roughly the same thing. If you built, like, fleets of nuclear power stations, you then use that to invest in renewables, you brought down the cost, so you could have your hydrogen-based steel industry and so on. That could really be exciting. It would create loads of jobs and it would make Britain rich, and fundamentally people in 100 years' time would look back on that investment the same way that we look back in wonder on Victorian investment, like people finding a Roman mosaic in, like, Anglo-Saxon England and being like, think of the gods who built this. But ultimately, It's fine for somebody, for activists to say, like, we need to be investing in the steel energy future, right? But fine. That's a huge upfront capital investment, right?
Yeah.
Huge at the time when we don't have very much money. It won't come online for decades.
Yeah.
And how are we going to do it? Because ultimately, it doesn't matter if you're using hydrogen, you still need energy. Right?
And even, Matt, when I'm thinking about the Industrial Revolution that we are in now, the fourth Industrial Revolution, it's called the digital age. We don't even have the power to run the data centres. The AI will require so much electricity for these vast football pitch-size data centres. We can't even do that at the moment.
Listen, Bev, we can't even get the trains to run on time. Ukraine has trains that run more on time than the ones in this
We can't
country,
even get Wi-Fi on a train, Matt.
No, totally. I think it's interesting. Henry will know a little bit more about this than me. One of my political idols, Tony Benn, was one of the cabinet ministers responsible for energy post-Attlee. And he said the reason he came out against nuclear eventually, after being a fan of it, was Attlee had been a bit of a sod, and the nuclear was actually being used as essentially a bomb factory for the Americans, and we were making nuclear bombs for them. But he said, and you may correct it now, there was no safe way of disposing of nuclear waste. And he said, until that is sorted, it's a ticking time bomb. So I don't know if you know more on that than me. And because I think most sensible people on net zero, climate change, whatever, would say, you need a just transition. This doesn't happen overnight.
What do we do with nuclear waste now?
Bury it.
Do we still just bury it?
Well, you're right. So fundamentally, it's not fissile
we
material.
haven't come up with any other way of getting rid of it other than burying it.
Well,
that worries me a bit. That.
Well, actually, I can defend this on two counts. One, it is basically safe. You build it does last a very long time, but you dig a really, really deep pit, you seal it in, and then there's a whole fascinating thing on nuclear architecture, actually, about trying to, because it could be dangerous for a very long time, trying to come up with architecture that would speak to people 10,000, 20,000 years, still communicate that this is dangerous. Google it. It's fascinating. But the other thing is, if we bury it, and we do, in 10, 20, 30 years' time, discover a way to process nuclear waste so that it's safe, we can dig it up. This is why, actually, the crusade against landfill was such a bad idea, right? We shipped all of our recycling to China and they dumped it in the sea.
Yeah.
Because landfill looks bad on television.
Yeah.
But, for example, we've now sort of started developing enzymes that can eat plastic, right?
Yeah.
Now, if all of our plastic waste had just been dug in some pits and was there, we could then dig it up and have them eat it, right? So, actually, burying nuclear waste, it's not ideal, it's not perfect, but if you think about the danger of that, and to be clear, it's not a bomb or anything, right? It's just some risk of radiation leak versus the cost
of an... of mild cases of cancer across housing estates?
But it hasn't really... I don't think... Has it caused that ever? Has it been found to do that?
I have no idea.
It's buried...
Well, that's the risk. That's the fear.
Well, it's the fear, not really the risk. It's very deep, it's buried really deep underground and sealed in lead and everything else. But you think about the cost of still having coal-powered plants, right? People breathing in all of the emissions from that. That's killed far more people. It's far more dangerous.
Yeah.
So, no, we should have nuclear.
Interesting. Do you think we should have nuclear?
I'd have a lot of reading for me to go away and do, apparently, yeah.
Well, apparently
I'm
it's very
open-minded.
interesting to look at nuclear architecture that will protect the people in 20,000 years.
I'm such a crushing nerd, but it is really...
I like nerds, Henry. You're very welcome here. Right, still to come this afternoon, Prince Harry has claimed that his worst fears have been confirmed after new evidence suggests that his police protection was withdrawn to try to keep him in the royal family and in this country. Is he right? Don't go anywhere. This is Britain's Newsroom. No, it's not. This isn't Britain's Newsroom. It's the weekend. Don't go anywhere.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Can you find love in your twilight years? That's what we're asking this morning. Broadcaster Ryan Mark Parsons and former Conservative MP Anne Widdecombe join us now. Good to see you both this morning. Anne, let's start with you. Is 70 too old to date, do you think?
70 isn't too old for anything.
Oh.
Everybody ages at different rates. Both mentally, physically, in the sorts of things they like. When you say to me, is 80 too late to, is 70, well, we might even say 80. It's too late to find love. The answer is just look around you. Lots of people have. But let me say right away, no, that's not an invitation. I've absolutely no ambitions in that area at all.
Ryan, Mark, what do you make of it? Do we need to stop putting a bar on ageing and dating?
No, I don't think we should. I think once you get to such an old age, you really should be looking for love internally. I mean, you should self-love. I just don't see the point at 70 years old to be searching for love at that point. I think you should go on holiday somewhere. I think you should find love with the sunshine and a cocktail, perhaps, instead of looking for a man or a woman. I think at what point do you decide that you know, love is not going to come around knocking on your door? And I think probably at the age of 70, that is when you should decide it's time to give up. I'm 24, living in London. I know how incredibly hard it is to find love. I don't know how anyone who has wrinkles and grey hair at the age of 70, over someone like me, could perhaps find love. I just don't think it's possible. I think it's a nice idea, but I think it's not feasible. And also, I don't think there's any point at that age.
The People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend. It's me, Bev, this afternoon while Dawn is away. Now, new shocking allegations that Prince Harry has claimed the royal family attempted to trap him by deliberately removing his police protection. Now, this is, of course, the legal case that's been going on this week. The Duke of Sussex says that the decision was made to keep him and Meghan Markle from departing the royal family and moving abroad. Now, Matthew Talbot, Prince Harry has a phenomenal ability to cast himself as the victim in every situation. Everyone feels sorry for him because his mother died in awful circumstances, and I will never get over the pictures of walking behind that coffin, seeing him walk behind that coffin. However, he is a grown man now, and he has to start taking some sort of responsibility for his life. He lives in a wonderful world of privilege, in possibly a gilded cage that most of us could only imagine the benefits of having that life. Is he right when he says that the reason his royal protection was taken away was because the royal family were trying to manipulate him into remaining in the family?
I think the problem is we don't know of it being secret evidence.
Yeah.
I come at this from a perspective of being the black sheep of the family and having been castigated a little bit.
Are you the Prince Harry of your family, Matt?
My mother would have said so several years ago. I'm telling you, she wouldn't now.
They're all high Tory.
I think this stuff makes me sad, right? Strip away the sort of royal family sort of stuff. This is a family going through a bit of a crisis and they've all fallen out, and that's sad for many reasons. I think for him to take responsibility, I think he has. But the PR machine of both sides, both the royal family and then the sort of Meghan and Harry side, then begin to whir into sort of start working. I think he took responsibility in the sense of, I think he's possibly he saw what happened to his mother and the way she was treated by certain elements of the press and the way that she sadly died. And I think he chose his wife over his family. And I think that rankles a lot with the family, who will feel a certain way, as lots of sort of quote-unquote normal families probably would. And I sort of fall on the side of, I think there's something deeply honourable, actually, and something really lovely about being so deeply in love with somebody, and people will have their own opinions of her. I mean, I don't know her, and I just think, leave her to it, whatever. And they see it as she split up the family. He's made his choice, and he's taken responsibility and gone, no, I'm putting my wife first. I do not want her to end up in the same way my mother did. And therefore, he's made... Whether the family have acted in spite, families do that, we don't know. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. were the family worried about the broader picture of the royal family looking split? And you want to, when you're the head of state, you want to look like you're united and stuff. So maybe you've acted in a way to protect the broader family. I don't know. But ultimately, we don't know. I just think it's a really sad situation for all sides, in a sense, when families end up a little bit broken.
Yeah, it is. You can see it on the family side of this, can't you, Henry? But you can also see that the British taxpayer has so far spent £500,000 on the legal fees over this situation. He says it's too dangerous for him to come here if he doesn't have armed protection. That's what this case is really all about. But if he went to Ukraine just a couple of days ago, apparently it's safe enough for him to go to Ukraine. Should we be giving him armed special protection, even though he doesn't fulfil any of the royal duties?
I think I disagree with Matthew slightly in putting him in the same category as Edward VIII in the pantheon of royal virtue who've chosen love over the duties of office. But ultimately, this case is ridiculous. I mean, one, his argument doesn't even make any sense. Surely if they wanted to trap him here and it's so dangerous, they'd have kept his security if he stayed in, right? Instead of withdrawing it and making it no odds. But ultimately, the thing is, Harry could have done several things when the situation went south, right? He could have moved to another Commonwealth realm and discharged his royal duties there. Can you imagine if he'd gone to Australia and basically just taken over the responsibilities of the Governor-General? Or he could have gone for a genuinely private life, perfectly possible. Instead, they moved to California, and this is the critical bit. He and Meghan have made continual efforts to spin a private fortune out of their connection to the royal family, right? Out of the titles of Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and their only claim to fame is their connection to the royal family, which is why he keeps popping up. He didn't have to be at any of these hearings. Because he's realised that's the only way that he stays relevant. And so the question here is, should the British taxpayer be providing effectively state subsidy for somebody who simultaneously claims that his high profile makes it too dangerous for him to come here, and then has an entire business plan based around maintaining that profile?
It's hard to argue with that, Matt.
No, I think Henry makes good points. I just seem to recall that after the whole sort of Megxit debacle, as it was called, there was people that came forward. I believe he became a target more seriously of groups like ISIS.
Well, that's because in his book Spare, he talks about how many Taliban he'd killed.
Yeah, no, listen, he's not helped himself, but ultimately it's probably a good thing in my book if you're taking out elements of the Taliban, it's fair enough.
Be careful, Matthew.
No, quite. I'll deal with a fatwa on the way out the door, won't I?
Says Matthew.
No, but I think what would it look like for us as a country if, God forbid, something was to happen to him, he was targeted? How does the family feel?
I know.
It's very tricky.
As you are the Prince Harry of your family, then.
God.
How did you manage to build those bridges? What lessons could Prince Harry learn from Matt Torbett?
A lot of counselling.
He's had a lot of that. He's done it. He literally did a Netflix special watching him in his therapy room.
No, listen,
slightly defeats the point of private therapy.
I hope it has done him good. It did me the world of good. I think you at times have to be the bigger person. If your family are acting spiteful, which at times my family did, at times I probably did, you've sometimes got to let bygones be bygones. It's hard, especially when you think, I'm not the one at fault, and I didn't think I was. You've got to try and work hard to build them bridges and sort of go, you're actually reliving the trauma by being at loggerheads on a daily basis, and actually for him, living it out in the public eye, whether that's through choice or not, he's always going to be a person of interest. People will report on this sort of stuff. So he's just got to try. And it's hard, it is hard, but,
out of his inner child into his inner adult, doesn't he, Matthew?
We all have to do it at some point,
We all
Bev.
have to do that at some point. Right, let's talk about accents, can we? I love this story. So Kate Adie, BBC legend news presenter, was talking at an event, and she said that the BBC had a list of unofficial accents which were hated by the public. And at the top of that, Henry, was the Birmingham accent.
Which I can't do.
You have a lovely accent.
Well, thank you. It was funny, when I did years ago, when I first started out in journalism, and I was up in Chorley doing work experience, and I'd have to make phone calls, and I had more than one person be like, oh, that's a BBC accent.
You sound quite posh.
Yeah, posher than I probably should. I don't know quite how this happened.
I sound posher than I probably should. You might find that surprising.
I have a friend who has a much posher voice, and none of her family do. And she says it's because her parents, they TV parented her as a child, but they insisted on it being Turner Classic Movies. So that's where she picked it up from. But it's some of the stuff in here is fascinating, because certainly in the past there was really an idea of the proper accent for media, not just on the part of like out-of-touch BBC executives. There's a wonderful detail in this story, which is somebody who was saying when they started out in local radio in, I think, Durham, and they had someone with a local accent who was reading the news bulletins, and they get tons of, bear in mind, this is a local station, they get tons of complaints from all over the shop, just being like, that is not the appropriate voice for the news.
We've come a long way, actually. We have come a long way, because only go back 25 years and almost any accent on the BBC or any telly programme really was RP. It was a kind of a sort of estuary English, Matthew. Not like how you speak. I'm northern as well, but I'm not as northern as I used to be because I've gone a bit posh since I've lived down here 25 years. But it all started with Melanie Sykes. Do you want a flake in that, love? With that Boddington's beer commercial. Well, and then from that point onwards, it was like the first domino fell, and then you started to hear Vernon Kay, Tess Daly, Ant Deck. It was all early 2000s.
Well, no, you're right, actually. And that would have been the era I was growing up with, and it became sort of more normalised to hear those accents. I think if you go back, and actually the interesting nugget Emery had pointed out, I think there's probably an element of internal classism, and maybe people trusted the media and maybe the state a little bit more than what they used to, and they expect, people tend to equate poshness with intelligence, and it doesn't always extrapolate. It's interesting you mentioned mine. My mates think I speak posh on the telly. They keep saying, why does he keep speaking like that? And I think you almost have this internal classism yourself of your telephone voice or your TV voice or whatever else. Whereas now, I think authenticity is more sought by media, in which people don't necessarily trust the received pronunciation accent, the BBC English accent, and therefore they want more localism potentially in people that speak like they do, if you will, with a bit of an accent. We've shifted a little bit.
It is, and it's about social class, because we're no longer kind of tugging our forelops and doffing our caps. Well, people still do actually doff their caps. I used to think I wanted to create an app that would put Jacob Rees-Mogg's, no offence, Jacob, put Jacob Rees-Mogg's speeches through an app and came out Geordie or came out Brummy and played them to people and say, are you still as convinced with the veracity of what he's saying in that different accent?
I mean, the point of designed accents, because RP and estuary different, but RP is a designed accent, and it's precisely because it adds to the music and lyricism. It's the same with Mid-Atlantic, which was the American version. But actually, the interesting thing, if you go all the way back, because obviously we do associate RP, which really nobody speaks now.
Received pronunciation.
Yes, with received pronunciation, which is very sort of clipped and formal, and you look at old clips of the Queen.
1950s radio.
With upper class.
Yeah.
But when you look at the original origin of it, it was actually the Victorians' conception of progressive. Because the whole point was that there was this accent which everyone learned if they went to, obviously, the certain types of school, but it meant it erased the prejudice that you might face for coming from a region, right? Because it's like if you were growing up in Yorkshire or whatever, you could interlocute with someone on the same terms. You spoke with the same accent as the person who went to Eton or the person from London. And so from their perspective, it was actually a leveller. And it's interesting how then it sort of shifted to being viewed as, in its own way, a class distinction.
So you mean sort of like the scholarship boys of the 1940s and 50s that would have been taken from maybe their mining community and dropped into Eton? Those were the...
Well, no, no, that was much later because it was designed to sort of in the Victorian era, right? But it meant that, for example, if you were a boy who went to a school and you came from a region, the idea was that if you were all taught this accent, then that meant that you wouldn't, because there were probably prejudiced attitudes against people from different regions, and it couldn't be held against you. And you could go into a room with someone who went to Oxford or Harrow, and you would speak like them, and you could therefore debate on even terms. So that was what they were trying to do. And obviously over time it mutated, and there were class elements and everything else. But it is really interesting. RP was never just the natural accent of posh people. It was designed to be the universal accent of the governing class by the Victorians to try and combat regional disparities and prejudices of exactly the kind that the BBC's list exhibits.
So you're saying we've regressed as a society now by Victorian standards, maybe?
Well, no, because if we've actually overcome the prejudice, that's better, right? But if this is real, and if public attitudes still showed that people hated these accents and everything else, then the fact is that they would hold someone in medium manner.
Fascinating. Sharon's got in touch at home. Good afternoon, Sharon. She says, I've got a strong Yorkshire accent and I'm treated like I'm thick all the time. That's the problem, isn't it? We presume that northern accents mean you're not very clever.
Honestly, I've spoken about this before. I had it for years in Westminster, and I could see it amongst those, certainly more so under Jeremy's team, who we're all very, very posh lads. And I could see it in their faces that I would begin to speak and they'd almost roll their eyes going, he's thick. And then you would make the point, they'd sort of almost look surprised and go, oh, he's got a point, actually.
Yeah,
Like,
well, do you know what, Matt?
feign it.
That's so interesting, because when I went to university, and I went at 21, I'd taken a couple of years out, and I would sit in these rooms discussing romantic poetry or whatever it was, Victorian literature, and there would be these public school boys who all spoke in these beautiful accents that I'd never really heard before until that point. And I would sit there and I think, wow, they're really clever, they're really clever, they're really clever. It took me about 3 weeks, and I thought, they're saying literally nothing.
This is what I did.
They're just saying it in a posh voice, so I'm believing them. And then I was like, OK, I know how this works. Right, I know how this works as well. We're going to go and take a quick break, but just to keep you up to date, the government's emergency legislation to take control of British Steel has now advanced to the House of Lords, where they are currently discussing the legislation. We've got the live pictures here. This is the peers in the House of Lords debating this very important bill. Right, still to come this afternoon, new figures showing that thousands of people have literally drunk themselves to death since 2020 in what could be another horrific wave of alcoholism in the UK following from the pandemic. Don't go anywhere, we'll look at it.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to The Weekend with me, Bev Turner. Matthew Torbett and Henry Hill are still with me, but we want to talk about this. We're going to discuss this as well. We're chatting about it in the break. Because amazing new figures about the number of people who've drunk themselves to death since lockdowns. Let's speak now to GB News' Health and Science editor, Lucy Johnson, who can put a little bit of meat on the bones of this story for me, Lucy. Good afternoon. Great to see you. Now, we all remember those lovely sunny days, particularly at the start of lockdown when we thought there was something to be frightened of, sitting in the garden, possibly pouring a glass of rosé, speaking for myself, by about midday, didn't have to drive the kids anywhere. Lovely. However, there's a dark side to what happened in the aftermath of that pandemic.
There is indeed. And these figures, so this is a 40% increase in the number of people who've died directly from alcohol. So that's either alcohol poisoning or alcoholic liver disease. That's 4,000 extra deaths. And what those figures represent is just the tip of a very dark iceberg. So not only have you got the alcoholic-related cancers, alcohol-related accidents, and millions more people drinking with those associated harms, but also we're only just beginning to learn that there are huge problems in our society. We have a pandemic of mental ill health among young people. 1 in 4 17 to 90-year-olds now has a mental health disorder. It was 1 in 10 before the pandemic. We have speech and language problems. We had rising obesity. We have a huge number of businesses that had to close, anxiety, depression. Some scientists have argued that much of this could be to do with the cost of living crisis, or that then it was the fear of the virus. But many of these figures we're learning about are ongoing. So these people are still drinking. The mental ill health is still ongoing among young people. And we're just looking at it now. So some people, some scientists are saying to me, we've got a COVID inquiry, but actually we need a separate inquiry to look at the harms of lockdown. And we need to make sure that with any other future state intervention, we need to weigh up the risks and benefits, because we didn't do that, or we didn't appear to do that at the time.
At the time, Lucy, and we're not doing it now either. So categorically, these figures are showing that the drinking deaths specifically can be traced back to those lockdowns in 2020.
They can, yeah, because they've been modelled by University College London, and they've looked at it and they've found that this is the extra. So the drinking deaths kind of remain steady, but since 2020, they've skyrocketed. There are other figures out today as well, which they've been analysed by the addiction specialist UCAT. They were from the Department of Education, and they show a 30% increase in drug abuse and mental illness among children in care. So the very, very vulnerable children and vulnerable people have been severely impacted by this. It's a ripple effect. It's not going away. And we need to really make sure that we look at the causes and try and do everything we can to redress it, because it's not just a flash in the pan.
Yeah, absolutely. The long-term implications are huge. Lucy Johnson, great to see you, the GB News' Health and Science editor there. My panel are still with me, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett. Henry, you and I like a drink, I think it's safe to say. But I'm going to come to you in a minute, Matthew, sniggering on my right there. Do you think, though, in this country, we have lost sight, maybe, of when drinking becomes problematic? There's so much sort of low-level daily drinking going on that we've forgotten that, actually, it can be a problem.
I think we've lost sight of it literally in that I think one of the big drivers of this is that drinking at home, right?
Yeah.
Because if you look at what happened after, the closures of pubs, right? We lost tens of thousands of pubs. Combination of factors for that. Obviously, one of the big ones was a smoking ban, cracking down on drunk driving, shutter loss of rural pubs because, and all of that. But what happens then, right? The people who were drinking then, they start drinking at home. And that means that you lose a lot of the limits, right? You can buy cheaper stuff in bulk because you're not having to buy at the bar. You lose the, you only drink at the pace that your mates are drinking, right?
And the pour sizing.
Right, exactly. You lose the Weights and Measures Act.
Yeah. Trust me, my glass of wine pour is bigger at home than it is if I'm in a pub.
It should always just be to the widest point in the glass. That is what wine glasses are built for. That's a wine pour. But you're losing all of those limiting... Kicking out time, right? You're losing all those limiting factors.
Yeah.
And so, actually, I think for a lot of people, drinking, socially drinking, can be really good. It loosens you up. It makes you more confident. We're evolved to drink it. This is a remarkable thing. Alcohol is poisonous to nearly everything in nature, and human beings have evolved to drink it. But if you're drinking at home, you lose nearly all of those social benefits, and you concentrate the health risks.
Such an interesting... Now, Matthew, you've been very honest about your alcoholism and the fact that you don't drink anymore. And you were telling me about a couple of venues while we were in the break then in London, which specialise in no alcohol. Pubs.
Yeah, there's a couple of pubs. One's called the Lucky Saint. I think it's run by... I forget who it's run by. That's terrible marketing. Good job I don't work for them. But if you head down to Soho, I think it's easily Googleable. They market themselves as a 0% alcohol outlet, and that's because that's the big thing that worries me. I'm, cards on the table, 2.5 years sober last week, struggled with my own drinking. I'm not anti-alcohol by any stretch of the imagination. I'm anti-alcohol for me. But I recognise pubs. I loved pubs. I still love pubs, and they're a great community hub. They bring people together in many ways, and in some ways are great outlets, especially for men, when men don't talk.
Yeah.
The harms, however, as a proud ambassador of Alcohol Harm UK, Alcohol Change UK, Alcohol Change did a bit of research on this. It's come out recently in a report called Alcohol Harms Across the Drinking Spectrum. I'll just give you the top lines rather than waffling on. Alcohol harms exist across all levels of drinking, and the report aims to sort of challenge the idea that harm from alcohol is limited to just problem drinkers and those sort of stereotypes people build up of. It cuts across every aspect of society, particularly the lower your socio-economic status, which may or may not come to a surprise. And the higher population level consumption means the greater harm. So countries or populations that drink more overall experience higher level of alcohol-related diseases, as Lucy alluded to, cancers, liver diseases and stuff like that. And the big thing that Alcohol Change are looking for is minimum unit pricing. And I think that is to sort of tackle the off-trade and the drinking at home that Henry speaks about, because there is totally a social aspect, especially around work culture. And it may mean more people drinking in pubs rather than sitting at home, not having the right measures and whatever else, and drinking yourself into a bit of a stupor. And I think the longer we go on like this, these then can't be attributed as COVID deaths, because we are only going one way. Certainly the first 2 or 3 years out, you could totally see the links between COVID and lockdowns and people then dying of liver disease and alcohol harm-related deaths. We're still going backwards on this, though, so I don't know how much longer you could attribute that to purely COVID.
That maybe there was behaviour change during that time.
I definitely
drank more.
I
definitely drank more from lockdowns. And I literally had to have a word with myself to go, no, it's not OK to drink every day.
I was the same every day, ridiculously so. And I think, actually, amongst my group of friends, you went one way or the other. You either became a bit of a fitness freak and started doing all the at-home exercises, or you got steaming every day, which is the path I chose.
Right, are they going now for now? Apparently you're going now. That's a shame. It's been lovely, gentlemen. I'm sticking here around. But Henry Hill, Matthew Torbett, thank you so much. Right, this lovely sunny weather out there might be making you think about getting a last-minute booking. Well, here is the forecast for our top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, it's an east-west split across the Mediterranean as we go through the next couple of days. Fairly settled for much of Turkey and Greece. Temperatures here climbing into the low 20s in places, but for much of Italy and southern France, actually some very unsettled weather developing. Could see some flash flooding in places. Also fairly unsettled for Spain and Portugal, although down towards the Canaries we should see some decent sunshine. For Tenerife, Wednesday, Thursday, we could see highs reaching 23 degrees.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. We're looking ahead to today. For most of us, it's remaining fairly fine out there, but we're already starting to see a change out towards the west. We're beginning to see some areas of rain move in. It's all courtesy of areas of low pressure developing to the west and also to the south of the UK, and that will bring up some cloud and also some outbreaks of rain, chiefly across southwest England this afternoon, but that will move up into parts of Wales too. But elsewhere, it's a generally fine picture. Best of the sunshine out towards the east, and in the sunshine, again, feeling very warm for the time of year. Could see highs reaching 23 or possibly 24 degrees down towards the southeastern corner. Into the evening hours. For much of Scotland, we should hold on to the fairly fine conditions, but already out towards the west, we'll start to see a bit more in the way of cloud come in that could just produce a few spots of rain. More significantly so for Northern Ireland, a rather grey end to the day here with a good chance of seeing a few spots of rain. Also for parts of northwest England, Wales, and again down towards the southwest. But elsewhere across England, we're hanging on to the fine conditions as we approach sunset with some late spells of sunshine. But throughout the night, the cloud and rain will spread its way further north and eastwards across the UK. So what it will certainly do is give us a milder night than what we have been used to. And I think for most of us, we'll see at least a few splashes of rain as the night goes on. But by the end of the night, some clearer conditions working their way into the west. But you can see temperatures overnight not anywhere near as low as they have been. So Sunday, overall, more cloud than what we have been used to right across the UK. But in between, there will be some brighter spells, especially for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland and maybe western parts of England and Wales. But for all of us, certainly feeling significantly fresher than it has been, but still not too bad. Temperatures reaching the high teens in the south.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Bev Turner. Today, now it is a political exit, but not from Parliament. Michael Fabricant has been booted off Celebrity Big Brother in the show's first public vote. The Tory MP was evicted after failing to win viewer support, and he has finally spoken out. So joining me now is showbiz and entertainment reporter Stephanie Tetchley. Steph, it's great to see you.
Bev.
Now, I'm not a massive fan of Big Brother, Celebrity Big Brother. There was a time when I was, but I feel like it's become a little dated. But it is managing to churn out some fairly interesting news lines this time.
It is, because obviously we have a few controversial characters. I think it was a good time for Michael to go, actually, because based off yesterday's episode, there was accusations of him being Islamophobic, because there was a talent show and he kind of was talking about immigration, and he made this one line where he said, if you come into this country, you have to do as the Romans do, basically saying adapt to the British culture. And then you had Trisha, who popped in and said, hold on, mate, are you trying to talk about Islamophobia? And in my head, I thought this is a good time for him to go, because that's what happens when politicians are put on these reality shows. Yeah. They are made an example of. They're surrounded by left-wing celebrities who are going to find issues with everything they say and do. So I think it's a good time for him to go.
And you're very vulnerable to the edit, of course, because you don't know what he might have said to qualify that statement.
Yeah.
And he actually got grilled about his hair.
He did.
I have had Michael Fabricant in this studio.
I've interviewed him before as well.
And I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to ask him about his hair.
Okay,
it's been on the tip of my tongue, but it's been completely inappropriate when he's there to talk about something else. But Patsy Palmer actually did grill him, didn't she?
Well, it kind of is the elephant in the room. You know, Patsy Palmer was like, is that your real hair or is that a wig? For many years now, he's always said that is his hair. But that's the whole point of these reality TV shows. They get all these people in, like Big Brother, because people want to find out about them. They're quite vulnerable because they're in a house of people they don't know. So here's the point to talk about it.
Does he sleep in his way? Well, he even then, he kind of... Patsy Palmer was unusually, I thought, a little sort of... she wasn't very diplomatic in the way she did talk to him about it, because he was saying, well, I used to have long hair, and it was obviously something that he felt, and he said, I don't like to talk about it, actually, and I felt a bit sorry for him.
Well, that's the thing. I think when you're in there, before you go in there, they give them a lot of psychological kind of tests to see how they'll do in it, but you're dealing with different characters, and Patsy Palmer, she was quite sensitive yesterday due to Mickey Rourke making fun of her, saying she can't cook, how she's bad in bed. This was all a part of a talent show, so I think they're trying to drive up the entertainment, but beyond the entertainment, you've got people who do have feelings and are quite sensitive.
Yeah. And do we have any idea how the viewing figures have been for this series?
Well, it hasn't come out, but to be honest, it's been dipping over the past few years. I think a lot of viewers have just got bored of the same old reality TV narrative.
Yeah. Right, thank you, Steph.
Thank you, Bev.
To see you. Thank you for keeping me company this afternoon. I will be back on Britain's Newsroom at 9:30 on Monday morning, but don't go anywhere. The brilliant Nana Akua is up next. Nana.
Thank you, Bev, and good afternoon. Look, we have such an exciting show, brilliant panel this afternoon. Chris Worrell and also Mark Field will be asking whether it's time to renationalise steel. There's obviously a big kerfuffle at the moment in the Houses of Parliament and the House of Lords. We'll be bringing you a lot of that live. Plus, in my niggle, I'll be talking about Ed Miliband and net zero, utter madness. Stay tuned. That is on the way in a matter of moments. But first, let's get an update with your weather.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast from the Met Office. Well, looking ahead, it's all changed now, certainly turning much more changeable across the UK. Generally, the wettest weather will always be out towards the west, but for all of us, certainly feeling much fresher. So the reason is we've got low pressure starting to dominate across the UK, and that's really going to bring in some bands of showers and also some rain at times. And that's what we've got as we end Saturday, moving into the early hours of Sunday as these bands of showery rain work their way eastwards across the UK. So I think most of us seeing some splashes of rain at least as the night goes on, but with the cloud cover in place, certainly a much milder night than what we have been used to. I think most towns and cities staying up at least into mid-single figures. So as we start Sunday morning off in the south, a mixture of some cloud, maybe still some rain lingering across the far east. Where further west, we will see some sunshine first thing, but showers already moving in across the very far west, and that will be a feature of the day's weather. Also some fairly bright conditions for Northern Ireland and Western Scotland, where the further east you are, still hanging on to some night-time cloud. But you can certainly see temperatures starting the day much higher than what we have had over the last few days. So moving into the rest of Sunday, really it's going to be a mixture of some sunshine, but also a few showers. The showers could be heavy and possibly thundery in a couple of places, with maybe the best of the sunshine in the afternoon across parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, and eventually maybe into parts of East Anglia and the southeast. Temperatures certainly down on the last couple of days, so it's still reaching around 17 degrees in the far southeast, so still respectable for the time of year. Into the evening, a fairly quiet night to come across much of England and Wales, also eastern Scotland, where out towards the west we're seeing another band of showery rain moving, and that's really going to set us up for a fairly changeable week across the UK, with temperatures trending back down to near normal for the time of year.